Ke a leboga le ka nna. Let's allow the secretary to read the first order of the day.
Consideration of report of Standing Committee on Auditor General on determination of remuneration of independent constitutional institutions.
Thank you. May we call upon the Honorable Mama Bolo from the virtual platform to introduce the report.
Honorable Chairperson, I'm sorry, it's supposed to be Honorable Van Schalkwyk.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Van Schalkwyk. Honorable Van Schalkwyk, are you on the platform?
He was not sitting on his.
Chairperson,
Thank you, Sharon. Continue, ma. You may continue. You were visible now. You were visible, Honorable Van Schalkwyk. I'm told that you have to introduce the report.
thank you, Chairperson. On annual basis, Parliament is called upon to give due consideration to the President's determination in considering the remuneration of institutions that support democracy as found in the chapter. The exercise needs to take into consideration a number of factors, and whilst the President provides his rationale for determination that he has made, President must look into the merits of the determination and satisfy itself or not, as the case may be, that the legislative arm of state has applied its mind. The power lies with Parliament to approve or not approve the determination of the President. The context in which these determinations are made is critical and is what they influence the President in making the determination. Upon receiving the letter and determination from the Speaker, the Standing Committee on the Auditor General had to apply its mind to the merits of the content of both documents. We are at all times also guided by the terms of the determination of remuneration of office bearers of Independent Constitutional Institutions Law Amendment Act of 2014. Section 7.1 of the Public Audit Act 25 of 2004 provides that the Auditor General is entitled to an annual salary
Yes, we can hear you. Continue. We can hear you, Honorable Van Schalkwyk. You can continue.
Auditor General is entitled to an annual salary and such allowances or benefits as determined by the President, provided it is approved by the National Assembly. What is common cause and what the Standing Committee had to apply its mind to was the context in which this determination was being made. Government has been operating under a policy of fiscal consolidation since 2013, and therefore remuneration of office bearers of constitutional institutions are subject to this fiscal policy in the same manner that government departments are affected. Further, at the time of signing the letter, it was common cause that the country was in a technical recession and that this was having a profound impact on economic growth, deepening poverty and rising unemployment. These were all primary considerations the committee has to make in its mind and in applying its mind. Therefore, the determination that the committee had to consider was, number one, a salary freeze of 0% for office bearers earning 1.5 million rand and above. Number two, a 2.8% salary adjustment for office bearers earning between 1 million and 1.5 million rand, and then a 4.5% salary adjustment for office bearers earning below 1 million rand. On the 10th of July 2020, the Standing Committee on the Auditor General considered and unanimously supported and approved the intended determination by the President of the Republic in relation to the Auditor General of South Africa. I therefore move for the adoption and approval by the National Assembly of this report. I so move. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Requests for declarations of vote have been received. I will now allow a member of each political party wishing to make a declaration an opportunity to do so. I'll start with the Honorable George from the DA. Honorable George.
Thank you, Chairperson. The DA supports the findings of the committee and the approved determination by the President of the Republic in relation to the Auditor General of South Africa. The proposed salary freeze for office bearers earning 1.5 million and above is very similar to what we have been proposing all along. A salary freeze for all state millionaire managers for at least 3 years. The Minister of Finance needs to take notice of this report and implement similar measures across all state departments, not just the Office of the Auditor General. The ANC hard lockdown has killed millions of livelihoods, and those lucky South Africans who have not lost their jobs have taken salary cuts, while the state millionaire managers have comfortably been sitting at home defended by their unions to milk the state coffers of higher than inflation rate increases at a time when the country can least afford it. The DA can only hope these recommendations are an indication that whilst we are crashing towards the fiscal cliff, the ANC will finally realize that further enrichment of cadre-deployed state-employed millionaires is not morally defensible. The DA supports the findings of this committee. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable George. The Honorable Mautre.
Thank you very much, House Chair. House Chair, South Africa's economic challenges started long before COVID-19. The implementation of budget cuts also started long before the COVID-19. For the majority of workers in petrol stations, mines, farms, factories, cleaners in municipalities, security guards, their wages are declining if we take the standard of living. It is very few senior officials and people like the Auditor General who have enjoyed the benefits of salaries that were in line with the true cost of living and inflation. However, the executive is using COVID-19 as a disguise to implement budget cuts, including salary freeze. While for most senior officials and office bearers, this will not have an immediate impact. For the majority of workers, a budget freeze will only deepen inequality, food and economic insecurity, especially if this parliament continues to rubber stamp proposed wage freeze across the public service. As parliament, at least the opposition parties who are not here to rubber stamp, because we must take a stand and reject these austerity measures. The government should not be freezing salaries when the demand in the economy is low and people do not have money. If you do not address this blanket approach of the salary freeze, Chairperson, the whole economy will move from recession to depression, because when you cut government expenditure, you are cutting government contribution to the economy, and government expenditure is one of the main contributors to this economy. We have already approved budget cut to the budget for historically disadvantaged institutions of higher education by more than 300 million. We approved cut to transport budget by 4.6 billion rands. We also approved budget cut to agricultural budget by 2.4 billion rands. This salary freeze must be understood in the context of austerities that are being pushed by Finance Minister Mboweni and the National Treasury. We must reject austerities, and as the EFF will not get tired to make people of South Africa aware of this truth. For far too long, the ruling party has used boards of state-owned entities and statutory bodies, including constitutional bodies, to deploy unqualified, corrupt, and incompetent comrades, husbands, wives, and children who don't have either the experience or the necessary qualifications. A practical and sensible way is to assess salaries of all senior officials so that there's a detailed review of remuneration instead of salary freeze informed by the bankrupt and ideologically misguided austerity policies. Some public office bearers, Chair, are paid salaries as if they are employed full-time when they are actually not. We must also bridge the gap between the least and highest paid workers, especially in state-owned entities. We cannot have state-owned entities with the lowest paid workers paid below living wage, while senior managers are paid as if they work for the private sector. We can attract skills in public institutions and still pay acceptable market-related salaries and bridge the gap. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The Honorable Hlengwa.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chairperson and Honorable Members. The IFP wishes to affirm the fundamental position and role of independent constitutional institutions in our democracy. The IFP also recognizes the need to remunerate the officials of these institutions in a manner that not only acknowledges their importance, but also provides the independence that is indeed needed to allow effective execution of their mandates. Institutions like the Auditor General, the Human Rights Commission, the Public Protector, and others are instrumental in holding our government accountable. The IFP acknowledges the unique and precarious position that the public purse finds itself in due to largely the coronavirus's pandemic impact on the global economy. We remain mindful of the challenges that the pandemic has presented, which have demanded swift and carefully considered action. We have already experienced a redirection, reallocation, environments, and deviations of funds from departmental budgets to address the fiscal demands brought on by the pandemic. This has required creativity and demanded patience when it comes to the fulfillment of targets in annual performance plans. As we experience these fiscal challenges affecting both government and our constituencies, it is important for us to make financially sound decisions about remuneration across the board. The IFP therefore notes the salary freeze approved by the President of the Republic for those earning 1.5 million and above, the 2.8% salary increase for those earning between 1 million and 1.5 million rands, and the 4.5% increase for public office bearers earning below 1 million rands. At such an uncertain time, it is important that public office bearers join the country in cautious spending while seeking the balance necessary to continue to exercise the necessary oversight functions. The IFP supports the report. I thank you, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you. The following speaker is Honorable Swart, who is in the chamber.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, the ACDP rises in support of the report, which provides for the salary determination of the AG and its staff. We are deeply appreciative of the exceptional work done by the AG, Mr. Tim Makwetu, and his team. Sadly, many of their recommendations over the years have not been complied with, mainly at local government level. Of the 257 municipalities in the entire country, only 20 were awarded clean audits. One hopes that with the additional powers given to the AG's office, quicker and more effective action will be taken against accounting officers who repeatedly breach the PFMA and the MFMA. Not only can the office now refer suspected material irregularities to law enforcement agencies, it can also ensure that further action is taken on recommendations in its audit reports. House Chair, it is absolutely disgraceful that much-needed COVID-19 funds have been stolen by politically connected individuals and companies. Have these people no shame in putting the lives of healthcare workers and many others at risk? Accounting officers involved must be held accountable and personally held liable to pay back the money in cases where these funds cannot be recovered from those who stole them. It was, however, not rocket science to see that this feeding frenzy of looting and corruption would take place, this after years of state corruption and state capture, with very few consequences for those implicated, as well as the needed relaxation of procurement regulations by National Treasury. The ACDP, like various other parties, warned government and urged it to take proactive measures to protect these funds. We urged real-time auditing of COVID-19 expenditure. As far back as the 26th of April, the AG said it had a team on standby to ensure that no public money was stolen during the COVID crisis. They added that deployment of such a multidisciplinary team is possible within days. and added that to facilitate very current feedback to the government, that is real-time auditing. Why was this not done? It is clear that politically connected individuals have benefited from this looting. Now, there's much wringing of hands when the looting could have been prevented by real-time auditing. There was clearly no political will. The SIU also started to pick up irregularities with expenditure early on. For some unknown reason, this key investigative unit was not declared an essential service during lockdown level 5 when the COVID looting started. We now know why. Urgent action is required. There is public outrage against the ANC government expressed at a level that I have not yet seen before. Clearly, urgent action is required. Please excuse us in the ACDP while we do not hold our breath that this urgent action will take place anytime soon. I thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Allow me to start off by saying the National Freedom Party supports the report of the Auditor General tabled here today. Indeed, Honorable House Chair, we need to accept and understand that the offices of the Auditor General has a pivotal role in South Africa in ensuring that there's accountability, particularly when you talk about the finances. Now, very importantly, I think the Auditor General has had some powers amended to give the Auditor General more powers. In fact, as the National Freedom Party, we are of the opinion that even those amended powers are still limited in terms of what the Auditor General can do. So having taken sight of the fact that the Auditor General has a major role to play in finances and the fiscus in South Africa, the National Freedom Party is of the opinion that indeed, whilst we support a freeze in terms of the determination and recommendation provided by the President, and we do know that Parliament itself has the responsibility to either approve or disapprove. We must also be mindful of the fact that the country is over 3 trillion rand in debt at the moment. Okay, and having considered those things, I think the decision that the committee took in terms of its recommendations is good enough, and the National Freedom Party supports the freezing and the recommendations as provided by the committee.
Thank you. Is there any other party that would like to make a declaration? Before we call on the ANC?
Thank you very much, House Chair. As the ANC, firstly, let's mention that we support the report. When drafting the Constitution of the Republic, the ANC was very clear that the office required constitutional protection and be afforded the independence necessary to conduct its work. Subsequently, over the years, we have, as the legislative arm of the state, on an annual basis, Parliament has given due consideration to the reports of the Auditor General. The concerns of the Auditor General over the years have led to the ANC into initiating a second process, that of giving the Auditor General increased powers to deal with financial mismanagement and corruption. Through this amendment to the Public Audit Act, the Auditor General have been given the necessary power to take meaningful remedial actions and is empowered to issue a certificate of debt where an accounting officer or authority fails to comply with the remedial action. Furthermore, we have welcomed the advice that the Auditor General has given to Parliament, the advice that through our respective committees we have been able to act upon. We have, as the ANC, equally been informed of the extremely serious situation that seizes our municipalities. That despite interventions and the guidance of the Auditor General, many municipalities remain financially dysfunctional. The Auditor General's municipal audit results for the financial year 2018-2019 reveals that many municipalities heavily rely on consultants for the preparation of audit reports and in particular for the preparation for financial statements for auditing purposes. This situation, Madam Chair, reveals that this appears to be no transfer of skills from the consultants to the municipalities. Further, that despite the high cost of this consultant, the municipalities derive no return on investment since these services rendered by the consultants in many instances do not meet the required standard. Some of the municipalities have returned disclaimed audit opinions and others did not meet the legally prescribed period of audit completion. It is this focus on the implementation of the audit outcomes, mainly on those municipalities which have received disclaimers and have been the subject of Section 139 intervention. This is our collective effort as Parliament and our collective responsibility. The ANC, having adopted the legislative sector oversight model, is determined to turn around the situation. It is within this context and the context that we have a severely constrained budget and fiscal policy that requires we have to be prudent with expenditure. While the Auditor General, based on the outstanding performance, would under normal annual circumstances receive the support of all in terms of an increase in remuneration, we are mindful that the current containment package has already been resourced out of savings, tax relief and other initiatives. We are confident the economic recovery plan that the ANC has tabled and what government currently has placed before NETLEC will take the country out of the current situation. It is within this context that the committee and the ANC agree with the present determination on the remuneration of the Auditor General for this financial year. The ANC therefore supports the committee report. I thank you, Honorable House Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Matafa. Honorable members, the motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections? 3, 2, 1, 0. No objections. Agreed to.
Chair.
Who is that now? Honorable members, before I called on the ANC, I made sure that all parties that would still like to make declarations should just announce themselves. And no one announced themselves. And after the ANC has spoken on this item, I'm not going to allow any further declarations. The question now is there any party that would like to make an objection on this? None. The report is agreed to.
Aye, Chair.
Yes, Honorable Ntlangwini.
I've said note the objection of the EFF Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That will be done. Can we have everybody being alert because we are dealing with reports so that if I call for objections before I declare it, the objections should be noted. Thank you very much. Your objection is noted and the report is accordingly agreed to. Now, can I ask the Secretary to read the second order?
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Higher Education, Science and Technology on Commission for Gender Equality Report on Gender Transformation at Tertiary Institutions 2018-19.
Thank you. May I now invite Honorable Mkachwa to introduce the report?
Honorable Chairperson of the House, honorable members, citizens of South Africa, members of the post-school education sector, but most importantly, young women, young men, and every student that identifies in between, good afternoon. Maafrika mahle.
Unmute, sis. You have muted yourself. I'm not sure if it's ITC can assist you.
Am I audible?
Now.
I had unmuted myself, Chair. Am I audible now?
Yes, you are. Continue.
Chair, must I begin or must I? I'm not sure where I was not audible.
Just start and we'll see, Maafrika.
Maafrika mahle, this week the sector mourns the death of Inkosazana uAsithandile Asemahle Kwasa Wagwalugalo, the 20-year-old first-year biological science Wits University student, was stabbed to death by her 23-year-old boyfriend in front of her 10-year-old sister and cousin. To the family of Kwasa and the families who have lost their loved ones to gender-based violence and femicide, sithi tutu agwehlanga lungehlanga. Honorable members, the Freedom Charter declared that the rights of the people shall be the same, regardless of race, color, or sex. The creation of a non-sexist society will not be attained without the use of all organs of the people's power. Our Constitution is founded on the principles of non-sexism and non-racialism, and thus we must protect the dignity of individuals from racial and sexual harassment and reject all forms of violent behavior in the post-school education and training sector and society at large. The Commission for Gender Equality between the years 2016 and 2018 looked into 22 out of the 26 universities as they need to understand gender dynamics accompanied by a slow pace of transformation within institutions of higher learning, as informed by reports of sexual harassment, gender-based violence, and the exclusions of persons with disability. As this report highlights the increase of representation at Nelson Mandela University with women being dominant in the senior management positions, the report equally highlights how the representation has not yet translated into other spheres of the institution's organogram. One would think that our new universities like Soplaiki and and Mpumalanga would give us a clean foundation to ensure from incision the representation we advocate for in our constitution and in the program for the transformation of higher education. Thus, we will not accept that all senior management positions at Soplaiki University are occupied by males and that there's only 38% representation of women in academic positions. We will not accept that at the University of Mpumalanga, there are only 2 academics with, being people with disability. The work of Chapter 9 institutions, such as the CGE, is important in promoting respect, protection, development, and attainment of gender equality, in monitoring and evaluating policies and practices of organs of state and public bodies in order to make recommendations. Thus, we must ensure that the CGE is fully resourced and capacitated to fulfill its mandate. As we welcome the Gender-Based Violence Policy Framework, the implementation of the Gender-Based Violence and Femicide National Strategic Plan will require sufficient support of the Commission to expand its scope to TVETs, CETs, and CETAs at a more rapid pace and at smaller intervals. A lack of gender representation in tertiary councils, senior executive management, and decision-making structures systemically entrenches the intrinsically patriarchal nature of society into institutions of higher learning. And to most repulse, it protects perpetrators of sexual harassment, gender-based violence, and femicide within our institutions. Institutions of higher learning are microcosms of society where the young must feel safe and free to garner knowledge and skills, where academics must be safe and free to harness the minds that will ensure the development and growth of our country. Thus, any element that seeks to deter the sector from achieving this and hinders the existence of trust within the sector must be decisively and unapologetically addressed. Thus, following receipt of a number of concerns regarding the appointment of Professor Mbati at Sefako Mokgato University, the Portfolio Committee on Higher Education, Science and Technology will be embarking on an inquiry into the appointment process of Professor Mbati as the Vice-Chancellor of SMU and other related matters, including, for example, poor governance at the University of Venda and at SMU. Through this process, honourable members, we do not embark on a witch hunt, but solely seek for law to take its course and for justice to prevail. The functional and representative governance of institutions is important to ensure that the infrastructure development grants are effectively and efficiently used to ensure the development of safe campuses. The functional and representative governance of institutions is important to ensure the development of gender and transformation policies, sexual harassment policies, to ensure the review of these policies, but most importantly, the implementation and upholding of these policies. Where there's deterrence, there must be consequence management. As we commemorate Women's Month, we celebrate the 95th birthday of the former president of the African National Congress Women's League, Siapalankwe Margaretrude Shophe. During this time, we are reminded to reflect on the aspirations of the women of 1956 who marched against the apartheid laws. So as we call for the expansion of history and pedagogy to include the stories of Black people and the stories of Black women, we commend the campaigns like the Roll Call of Honor by the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation to register and archive the presence and roles of all 20,000 women who participated in the 1956 Women's March. Former President of Burkina Faso, Thomas Sankara, once said, "There's no social revolution without the liberation of women. I sense the rumble of their storm and feel the fury of their revolt." Honorable members, I thus put this report forth before members to adopt. I thank you.
Thank you very much. May I now recognize the Honorable Chief Whip of the Majority Party?
Thank you very much, House Chair. House Chair, I move that the report be adopted by the House. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There has also been a request for declaration. I will allow the Honorable Nodata from the GA to take the platform.
Today I want to start by sending our deepest condolences to the family of Wits University student Kwasa Lukalo, who was killed in front of her little sister, Galenyanga Yamanina. She possibly would have been the first in her family to receive a graduation certificate. Instead, she was issued with a death certificate at the hands of us men. I'm very tempted to not even declare and speak to all of us men on this, even though the task at hand requires focus on the work of the Gender Commission in tertiary institutions. Gentlemen, I use this term very loosely. I was raised by a single mother who left both of her marriages because of being physically abused, even when she was 8 months pregnant with my little brother at the hands of her husband. Just last Christmas Eve, my beautiful little niece was harassed by a boy next door. And there are countless women and girls who live in fear just because of our existence. I myself am extremely terrified when I walk to my car in the evening outside the city hall. I fear being attacked or hijacked, not by a woman, but by those who look like me. If that's how I feel, I can only imagine the fear that lives within our sisters, mothers, aunts, grandmothers, daughters, and all women in society. It's high time we take action and exercise empathy. Just the ability to walk in someone else's shoes is an important trait to have. To recognize that someone else's experiences have value. We fight injustice because there but not for the grace of God go I. It is not a hard concept to grasp. It is what we ought to teach the boy child consistently to end perpetrators. Most importantly, call it out even in our own spaces and our circles. When you see something that is not right, you must say something. You must do something. That is the truest form of empathy, not just feeling, but doing. Not just ourselves or our women, but for everyone, for all of those who live under fear, including the LGBTQI society. Going into the report, the Commission was required to conduct hearings looking at gender-based transformation within institutions of higher learning. The hearings emanated from the media reports, as well as complaints received by the Commission, such as sex for marks, allegations in institutions of higher learning, sexual harassments at institutions of higher learning, as cited in Sefako Makgato University, the need for inclusion of persons living with disability in senior management and the adoption of gender policies, as we've seen the lack of such at Nelson Mandela University. Various institutions formed part of these hearings, even though some refused and had to be subpoenaed, which I believe there must be consequence management implicated and implemented for those institutions. They had picked up that sexual harassment is prevalent at higher institutions and predominantly comes in the form of sex for marks. Sexual harassment policies are not communicated to students and general staff members. The uncertainty around sexual harassment policy framework at universities has contributed to the students and staff members not reporting such matters to the university out of fear of victimization. Not all universities provide counseling. There are no helplines to report incidences of discrimination on LGBTQI+ persons. It was also noted that there are some institutions that were unwilling to come forth towards the Commission, and the Department of Higher Education and Training actually has no policy framework to guide institutions of higher learning as to how to deal with their policies. The DA is extremely concerned about the levels of gender-based violence in our institutions and remain a huge challenge. Thus, the work of the CGE is pivotal. The scourge is not an event of a day or a month, but a daily struggle we need to fight with vigor wherever it raises its head, and most importantly, create a conducive, safe learning environment, proactively, immediately, and consistently monitoring the progress of each institution. We therefore recommended that the Department of Higher Education urgently develops a GBVF policy framework for all institutions of higher learning to ensure that cases are not swept under the carpet because there is a lack of clarity on rules, and ensure institutions comply with that. The Commission worked with the Ministerial Task Team on GBVF at institutions of higher learning to monitor progress on policy implementation and actions taken when cases arise. The work of the Commission must expand to TVETs, CETs, and CETAs, as we would have seen the case of Precious Ramabulane, who was stabbed 52 times at Capricorn TVET in Limpopo, where I personally visited. I'm sure the institution would have taken her out before that incident happened. We need to ensure that and encourage to recruit people living with disabilities in our institutions. The DA supports this report. I thank you so much.
Thank you. The Honorable Tembekwaya from the EFF.
Chair, the Honorable Tembekwaya has got network issues. If you allow, can I take the declaration?
No problem. Continue.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Chairperson, you all know that we live in a racist and patriarchal society, and that there has to be a purposeful intervention by all involved to change this situation. We acknowledge that there has been progress in terms of employment of females at institutions of higher learning, but we are discouraged by the fact that in most senior positions at universities, males still play a predominant role. To make this situation even worse, most of the females recruited into these academic spaces are white females, and there's still a glaring lack of African and colored females in the academic setup. As an example, we know, for instance, that at Vet University, Adam Habib has made it a point that only Indian academics are appointed to senior positions at this university, and that if his wishes were followed, we would not have a black vice-chancellor succeeding him there. The marginalization of female leaders at these institutions is tied at the hip with racism, anti-African racism to be specific. Women have suffered most from the neoliberal reality of the past 26 years. A vicious cycle of triple oppression based on race, class, and gender has not been broken for black women in particular. We recognize that white patriarchy and sexism are pervasive in our society. It is black women who suffer the most from gender-based violence. Up to now, interventions for dealing with violence against women have been superficial, half-hearted, and based on the wrong understanding of the root causes of the vulnerability of women. The report of the CGE shows this insult to black women in more explicit terms. Universities employ black women for administrative posts, and when they are employed to do academic work, there's always a white person who must oversee their work. It is for this reason that these institutions, such as University of Cape Town, find it very difficult to handle a strong black woman, such as the current Vice-Chancellor, Mema Moketi Pageng. Strong black women leaders are always characterized as difficult to work with, lacking in one area or another. All this is the case because we have not had an overarching strategy as a country on how to transform these institutions of higher learning and how to ensure the forceful entry of black women into these spaces. We welcome the report on the CGE and hope that it injects the necessary energy to help us deal with transforming universities in this country. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Babu Ngobo from IFP.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair. Honorable members, the IFP applauds the work of the Commission for Gender Equality in championing transformation at our tertiary institutions. Institutions that lead in the knowledge creation and sharing should reflect the rich diversity of our democracy, while respecting the inherent human dignity of all and protecting the staff and students from racial and sexual harassment and other violent behavior. The IFP acknowledges that our society is a product of its past, where regrettably, not everyone enjoyed unfettered access to fundamental human rights. The journey to addressing the impact of this disenfranchisement in academics demands that we'll unlearn discriminatory practices and align ourselves with constitutional imperatives while positioning our institutions as progressive leaders in the academic world. The IFP notes with concern the slow pace of transformation at tertiary institutions despite, in most cases, the existence of policies demanding the same. We continue to see reports of sexual harassment, abuse of power, and the systemic exclusion of people with disabilities at tertiary institutions. While many institutions employ exemplary hiring practices, most display a disheartening domination of top management by men. Further, there is a pattern of excluding PWD from both staff positions and access to education. There is a worrying absence of gender parity in STEM faculties. Another discouraging finding is that some institutions do not even have transformation budgets, GPV policies, or gender equality handbooks to implement the DHET standards. Therefore, there can be no support for victims of exclusions or other abuse. The IFP supports the call for heftier consequences for non-compliance with the legislative framework on employment equity. We call for criminal sanctions to accompany internal process that find unlawful behavior took place. We also ask the DHET led by example and implements the necessary standards itself before demanding the same of institutions. The IFP supports this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next speaker is from the FF Plus, Honorable Boshoff.
Thank you, House Chair. The report of the Commission for Gender Equality conducted in 2018 and 19, but only considered in June this year, is salvaged by the recommendations made by this committee, the Portfolio Committee that is. Gender inequality is a pivotal issue in the contemporary South African society, as in others. The approach followed in this report is to decree a new and transformed society together with all its attributes. As a constitutional imperative, this image of an ideal society gains a neutrality, something which cannot be altered or argued about. What is ignored, however, is that it describes a reality which yet has to take root in society. That is why there is such a huge mismatch between the, let's call it, constitutional society and the real one. The real society is created in households and families where values are passed on from generation to generation and change very slowly. The reality is that effective contraception had made it possible for women who have access to it to pursue a lifelong career. However, some of these women enter into marriages and decide to have children. While it is possible to choose which marriage partner should raise and care for the children, it is not yet possible to choose which partner should bear the child. One could argue hours on end whether it is nature or nurture, but in the majority of cases, it is the mother who sacrifices a part of her working career to care for the children. Provided this is not based on coercion, it must be regarded as a perfectly legitimate choice. Although rather uncommon, it should also be regarded as a perfectly legitimate choice if the father decides to put his career on ice in the interest of the family and his wife's career. She may well be much better placed to act as provider due to her specific God-given talents. Which brings us to this report, which does a superfluous headcount of males and females in certain categories of employment at certain institutions of higher education. This is where a bit of qualitative survey skills could really assist the Commission, which seems to think that only a quantitative survey is scientific. Dat bekwaamheid en geskiktheid vir senior poste niks met geslag te doen het, hoef ons nie te beredeneer. Tradisionele waardestelsels is ook heeltemal versoenbaar daarmee. Trouwens, geslagsgeweld of seksuele gunsies in ruil vir loopbaangunsies is vir iemand wat tradisionele waardes hart en siel aanhang iets ondenkbaar. As mentioned at the beginning, the concrete recommendations of the committee develop GBV policies and investigate certain matters add something useful to a report which on its own did not have much to offer. The recommendation that policies need to be developed and that certain investigations need to be made commands support. Therefore, the FF Plus supports the adoption of this report. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. The UDM, the visitor, Kwankwa. UDM. Ulahlekile ba? We'll see if we will come back to you. Honorable Monsieur, NFP.
Oh, thank you very much. The National Freedom Party supports the report tabled here today. And House Chair, let me just start off by correcting something. And I'm going to quote the words of Vice Chancellor Adam Habib. I want to send out a clear signal to all sides of South African society that everyone, I repeat, that everyone has a place in our society and at Wits University, states Habib. We need strong staff irrespective of their color, and we need to be pragmatic about this, not overly ideological. Now, this is what is, I'm convinced that we can advance equity efficiently while at the same time attracting a new generation that is non-racially constructive. He goes on to say that Wits had its own new generation scholars program, but Habib says it is not clear how many graduates it has produced. And towards achieving this, he will be introducing research incentives to ensure they get the best and pay the best. Is the member from the EFF looking for what we have in the municipalities, 18 out of 257 getting a clean audit? Public Service Commission saying we do not have the capacity. What Adam Habib is saying, irrespective of the race, he is mindful of the fact of disadvantage because he was 10-year-old when he lost his parent. He is saying, but at the same time, let's choose the best if we want a quality university. And that's basically what he's saying. Honorable Chairperson, the National Freedom Party articulated it a few days ago, particularly with transformation and leadership and employment of women throughout South Africa in senior leadership positions. And here's an ideal example of the limited opportunities that are existing at some of the tertiary institutions. And I am quite satisfied that the Commission undertook this responsibility, and they have highlighted this to the committee, and that measures are being put in place in terms of all the recommendations that have been set here so that this matter could be dealt with, not just with women, but the lesbian, gays, the LGBTIQs, and very importantly, those with disabilities. So I think the Commission is doing a fantastic job, and the committee is behind this and supporting this. Let us support this as well, and the National Freedom Party supports this report by saying, let us not be racial. Let's not divide this country into races. That is where we've come from. We are one united South Africa. Let's work together. Thank you.
Thank you. AIC, Honorable Njaisa. Honorable. Honorable Njaisa, na ungekho ubaba uNkonka ubuyile. Nkonkwa, you are on the platform, but I don't know what's the problem. Okay, we'll try you again. Please try to... There is some sound. Where is it coming from? Okay. Al-Jama, Honorable Hendricks.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, the position of President of Convocation at a tertiary institution, especially a university, is a very important position because the President of Convocation represents graduates of the institution and also the current teaching staff at the institution. I was pleasantly welcomed the appointment of a black African lady from Galeto, a teacher who was on the SRC leadership when she was elected as president of the convocation. And we felt that here is something positive that is going to happen. What has happened at the University of Western Cape is that the main leadership marginalizes her because she's black. I've been an alumni of the university for over 20 years, and I've seen how they respected the males who were president of the convocation. But just because she is African, she's a lady, they don't give her any resources So it is very, very important that the Gender Commission looks at how leaders that are emerging, especially female leaders, black leaders, are being marginalized by males. And I personally have experience of that at the University of the Western Cape. The Gender Commission, soon after it was formed, called for the introduction of gender desks at universities. But they have never provided the resources because the universities has autonomy. And now no one can really impose anything on them, not even the Minister of Higher Education, in a letter that the Minister wrote to me last week. So it is very important that seeing that the university has too much autonomy, they use that autonomy in many cases to marginalize women and to marginalize black women. So the Gender Commission needs to be more vigilant. It's 20 years now, and now they come up with a report. And for me, the report, although we support it, is just old wine in new bottles. Thank you very much, Honourable Chair.
Thank you. Is Honourable Kwankwa back? Honourable Kwankwa? No. Honourable Nchaisa? No. Any other party that has not registered that would like to make a declaration? None. Honourable Litsia from the ANC. The platform is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. The other parties will be covered by us. Allow me to begin by sending our condolences to the family and friends of a certain Tuliswa Cynthia Dick, who was only 26 years old, a young woman from Kokosi, Forgeville, here in Merafong, was brutally killed by her partner last week Monday, or this week Monday, while she was 7 months pregnant. May her soul rest in peace. We would like to send a clear message to all men who continue to abuse and kill our women, children, people with disabilities, and LGBTQI community, that your time is running out. You must repent, and you must repent now. The NC Ready to Govern document of 1991 and 1992 envisaged a democratic society that will recognize the injustices of the past in forging a non-sexist, non-racist, and just society. The Ready to Govern envisaged a society where women are able to walk in the streets freely without fear of assault and should feel safe and free from violence in their own homes. The question we should ask ourselves is whether we're building a nation that protects women and people with disabilities. The post-education and training sector is confronted with the societal challenges of patriarchy. For students to succeed in their academic and training endeavors, a conducive environment that should be cultivated to ensure all women continue to acquire skills and knowledge so that they can make a contribution to the development of the economy.
You are hung?
Sector as the highest level of learning. Universities as microcosm of society should reflect the society we seek to create and be drivers of socio-economic transformation. The gender struggle for total emancipation of women requires a response to institutional patriarchal systems in pursuit of realizing the objectives of the white paper to have a post-school system that can assist in building a fair, equitable, non-racial, non-sexist, and democratic South Africa. An equitable society requires the bridging of the gender inequality gap by ensuring that mechanisms are built to enable women to participate in decision-making and administrative structures. Gender quota have proven to significantly impact representation. The ANC as a people's liberation movement has espoused principles of women representation in the leadership of the party and its deployment to the executive and even here in Parliament. This position reflects the determination of the biggest organization in Africa in creating a non-sexist society. Despite society being patriarchal, there has been significant progress of women representation in leadership structures. 26 years into democracy, we have increased in the number of women in academic positions and senior management of universities, despite the room for improvement in other universities, as mentioned by Honorable Mukhachu. The report by the Commission for Gender Equality, a Chapter 9 institution, is a result of this policy position of the ANC to institutionalize governance policies and regulations that are underpinned by principles of gender mainstream. The emancipation of women should not be a lip service or a matter of political expedience. The report identifies progress to close the gender inequality gap in mostly established universities. The University of Zululand has more females than males, with 534 females and 524 males. The Nelson Mandela University has 51% in 2001 from 41%, in 2019 from 41% in 2005. The fight against gender-based violence and femicide will require all people of South Africa, regardless of political party affiliation, religion, gender, race and class, education, communities, tradition, family and other social groups should play a significant role in shaping the understanding of boys and men. This understanding can either continue to breed sexism or to breed the principles of equality. We need to unlearn all patriarchal ways and contribute to the effort of combating gender-based violence and femicide. The Commission for Gender Equality is a key institution that should be supported and expand its impact across all sectors of society. The second pandemic has therefore been described. President, I can hear myself.
It's not
President
you, somebody Hlanganani, somebody, I think it's Kumede, must mute. Continue.
Thank you very much. President Ramaphosa signifies the recognition by government to advance gender equality. The implementation of the gender-based violence national strategic plan ushers a phase of increased effort to fight the scourge of GBV and femicide. This report makes a significant contribution in improving the state of gender relation and gender mainstreaming within the PSET system. Institutions will be required to follow improved policy directives to ensure women are equally represented in decision-making structures, and institutions are conducive to teaching and learning for women. The ANC therefore supports this. Also note that all political parties, except that one that never reads reports, the only one that will object to the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections? 3, 2, 1, 0, none. The report is agreed to. I will ask the Secretary to read the third order.
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Trade and Industry on Oversight visit to Gauteng.
I'll call upon the Honorable S. Mbuyane from the virtual platform to introduce the report. Honorable Mbuyane.
House Chair.
Yes, Honorable Nkosi.
I will introduce the report.
No problem, proceed.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. The honorable members, fellow South Africans, in line with the Parliament's oversight mandate, the Portfolio Committee on Trade and Industry undertook an oversight visit to entities of the Department of Trade and Industry, which are the National Regulator for Compulsory Specification NRCS, and the South African Bureau of Standards, SABS, in the Gauteng on the 4th and the 5th of February 2020. The agenda for the economic growth, which is globally competitive, requires that we build the necessary technical capacity to comply with the international standards of our products. The NRCS and the SABS are very critical in ensuring that the technical competitiveness of South Africa internationally. The purpose of the oversight visit was for the Portfolio Committee to assess progress in terms of implementing each of these entities' turnaround strategies and to determine to what extent they had resolved their audit findings. This oversight followed several engagements between the committee and the two entities in the fourth quarter of 2019. Having engaged with the entities and the department, the committee applauds the progress that has been made implementing the NRCS turnaround strategy. The committee also welcomed the progress that has been made in the turnaround strategies of both entities. However, the committee remained concerned with the slow pace of the ICT modernization project and the financial reporting challenge of the NRCS, as well as the financial sustainability of SABS. The committee resolved to continue to monitor both entities on quarterly basis to ensure that their challenges are resolved as soon as possible. Informed by this deliberation, the committee requests that the House to consider these reports. I thank you, House Chairperson.
I now recognize the Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thank you very much, House Chair. House Chair, I move that this report be adopted. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There's a request for declaration. I will go to the DA and call upon Honorable McPherson.
Thank you, House Chairperson. The DA will accept the report and support the report. However, I think it's very important that the House understands the history to both the SABS and the NRCS. These are two particular institutions that have suffered for a very long time without the necessary support and financial resources of the DTI. The SABS has particularly been a victim of the gutting and looting by the Guptas, particularly under the last CEO and chairperson of the board. That is well known and does not need to be rehashed. Sorry, I'm just being interrupted by the Honourable Nkosi. Now, that then caused the SABS to lose thousands of customers because their ability to verify standards became under question once they had sold themselves to the Guptas to verify coal, which was then sold on to Eskom to meet their dubious standards. This has caused an immense financial loss for a number of years for the SABS, which is now starting to catch up with them. That is why the DA 2 years ago called on then Minister Rob Davies to put the SABS under administration, which he reluctantly did and was the right thing to do. An interim administrator was then appointed under the auspices of Mr. Garstrucken, who is a very competent and qualified individual to do so. Sadly, he has been hounded out of the SABS by the interference of the DTI and the unwillingness of the DTI to enact the major reforms that are required in the SABS, which comes at a cost to the economy and to those that want to export. Because the truth of the matter is that once the SABS exited the market because it was unable to verify standards, private industries stepped into that gap. And the SABS is now no longer able to compete with those particular verification agencies because those private industries can do so at a cheaper and more reliable cost. So the question then becomes, well, what should become of the SABS? There's no doubt that the SABS is of immense value to South Africa. It is obvious that the SABS does a verification that cannot be done in the private sector. And therefore, it's important that the SABS then becomes rationalized into an entity that can then fit its purpose and money that is available to it. Because by the SABS's own admittance, it is going to run out of cash. Now, this is what Mr. Strachan wanted to do, and this is what was rejected by the political body of the DTI and the interference of officials. And so we are now back to square one with the SABS. And we do hope that actually the common sense will prevail and a full rationalization of the SABS will take place. On to the NRCS, another important body that allows for the importation of goods into South Africa, particularly into the retail sector. This is an issue that the DA has fought for 6 years to ensure that this body is up to date and meets international regulatory standards, as well as a modernization program that would allow us to cut down the waiting times, which can take weeks and weeks and weeks to issue letters of authority for the importation of particular goods. That's why the DA in the 5th Parliament proposed that a risk-based management system was developed. This was done so, but has been extremely slow to be rolled out by the NRCS because of a lack of funding and a continued delay of the ICT modernization program that the Honourable Nkosi spoke to. And so for as long as this program is delayed and these funds are not made available, the NRCS will continue to fight with one hand tied behind its back, which is why the committee has paid particular interest in this body and will do so going forward. Because now that we find ourselves in the disastrous economic situation that South Africa is in, mainly due to the ANC lockdown crisis that has been imposed on South Africans, it is unthinkable to have entities that promote exports, that promote the ability to earn foreign currency, to be hamstrung because of inefficiencies, lack of budget allocation, and political interference. I thank you.
Thank you. From the EFF, Honorable Yako.
Thank you, Chairperson. The EFF rejects this report as it seeks to sugarcoat the real state of affairs in the Department of Trade and Industry's two key entities. What we as a committee witnessed on the 4th and the 5th of February was not only deeply appalling, but exposed just the tip of the iceberg of what is the rot and neglect of our regulatory and standards entities. It is no wonder the acting CEO of South Africa's Bureau of Standards resigned just a day after our visit. The rare irony is an entity that measures the correct standards of South Africa's products, sitting in a building that is substandard, with labs that are substandard, with leadership that is substandard, and that is currently under administration. Each and every time the committee raised concerns on the functionality of the SABS and the NRCS, we were told that there's a turnaround strategy. What we witnessed on our oversight was that there's not only no leadership, but there's no clear plan to rescue these entities. There's a hopelessness from those who work there that needs attention from the minister. These two entities are but a symptom of the lack of will from the minister to get his house in order. During our visit, we were shown the following: the exposure lab, which measures the rubber and plastics. It was functional. We were informed, however, that the rubber labs that measure the standards in the piping industry are not functioning and that the work is outsourced to a company in Spain. We were shown the condom lab, which measures the quality of the condoms that are produced by the Department of Health, which is functional. We were shown the cement lab that needed some renovations and to this date has no resting facilities for its workers. It's sensitive to power outages and it gets crippled by the cuts from Eskom. We were shown the pesticides lab, which measures the standards of our fruits and vegetables. We cannot, however, leave behind the white elephant in that building, which was the set-top boxes that cost 27 million, which were produced by the Department of Communications and sits in this building gathering dust and remains unused to date. Our visit and interaction with the SABS and NRCS exposed the committee just how much work needs to be put into getting that house in order. It also exposed the lack of will from the department in making sure that these two entities are a priority. It mainly exposed just how hollow the capacity of the state is. If the engine of our economy cannot function, how do we expect to bolster our exports into other countries and ensure that our people maintain the best standards possible? So therefore, we reject the support. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. From the IFP, we have the Honorable Msimang. Mhlonishwa Msimang.
Honorable Chair, Honorable Chair, the NRCS and the SABS are key entities in ensuring quality control and safety of goods manufactured within South Africa. It is therefore imperative that such entities are fully functional as to deliver in terms of their respective mandates, ultimately in the interest of the consumer, in terms of health and safety, and in ensuring the goods and services are of a specified quality and standard. The technical infrastructure institutions of which the NRCS and SABS form a part of complement and support each other and together form essential links in the chain of quality product. If one entity underperforms, the entire process is undermined, with the net loser being the end consumer. Currently, of the four institutions, the NRCS and SABS were selected because of certain challenges that were identified by the Portfolio Committee in the 2018-2019 BRR reports. The oversight visit then being a follow-up as regard rectification of underperformance on mandates, as well as in terms of governance and operational matters. The IFP is pleased to note that both entities showed improvements in certain aspects of their turnaround strategies. The IFP supports the report. I thank you, House Chair.
Thokoza professori. Van die AFF Plus is achtbaar lede Mulder.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. The once proud South African Bureau of Standards, which was founded in 1945 and has been in administration since July 2018, is struggling and may even be in deeper financial trouble after the severe nature of the lockdown regulations imposed by the department. The Freedom Front Plus further predicts that the National Regulator for Compulsory Specifications, whose turnaround strategy is likewise under threat, will follow in the footsteps of the SABS. Voorsitter, die Vryheidsfront Plus verwelkom die insiggewende oorsigbesoek aan die twee beleerde instellings, maar is van mening dat 'n omkeerstrategie as sulks nie sal vrugte afwerp. 'n Totale herstrukturering van die instellings is egter noodsaaklik. Die VF Plus ondersteun daarom nie die komitee verslag. Dankie, voorsitter.
Baie dankie. ACDP, Honourable Thring.
Thank you, Honourable House Chairperson. In support
this report, the ACDP notes the progress of the NCRS and the SABS in terms of implementing the turnaround strategy and resolution of their audit findings, as these were the challenges identified during the committee's 2018-19 budgetary review and recommendation process. The ACDP notes the numerous concerns that were raised, those of the NRCS included delays in implementing the ICT modernization project, including not filling the vacancies to ensure that this project was effectively implemented. There were deficiencies in the financial reporting systems, exacerbated by the resignation of the chief financial officer. While an enterprise resource plan was effected to resolve financial system deficiencies, these still require monitoring by the committee. And then we also have laboratories that were not ideally located and had challenges of lighting and gravity, which could impact and would impact the accuracy of test results. On the side of the SABS, the challenges were concerns about the financial sustainability of the entity and its ability to re-establish itself as the preferred certification and testing service provider. The set-top boxes laboratory worth millions of rands had been established, but is lying idle due to a lack of clear policy direction from the Department of Communication. There was a lack of capacity with the cement factory. This is exacerbated by delays caused by electricity supply disruptions. And additionally, there was a 205 million rand that was spent on laboratory Q block, which to date has not been fully implemented or utilized because of incomplete fire requirements, structural problems, which all point to inadequate contracted design specifications. Honorable Speaker, it is the ACDP's view, House Chair, it is the ACDP's view that these two entities are symptomatic of a state that is failing. Years of financial, structural, and systemic mismanagement have caused these two entities to receive qualified audit opinions, resulting in an inability to deliver on their mandates. This jeopardizes public health and safety, environmental protection, and fair trade, resulting in a poorer quality of commodities, goods, and services, as well as a lack of conformity of goods within our country. The ACDP proposes that a solution lies in the amalgamation of these two entities under an efficient, competent entity, using the skill sets and best practices of one to improve the weaknesses of the other. I thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Sheikh Imam from the NFP. Honorable Sheikh Imam. Okay. Honorable Hendricks Al-Jama.
We covered, Honorable Chair.
Yes, Honorable Hendricks, you may proceed.
We support the report. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much. Honorable Sheikh Imam. Not there. Any other party that did not register? None. ANC, Honorable Mutaung. Please continue.
Chairperson.
Yes.
Chairperson, thank you very much, Honorable Mbuyane.
Agunamraro, Irake baba.
Yeah, siyabonga SK2. Chairperson, the technical infrastructure institution collectively ensure the products and services conform the national standard and the compulsory specification where applicable. This enables domestic and international trade while protecting consumers in terms of their health and safety and from unfair practices. Furthermore, the framework plays a role in protection of the environment in terms of plant and animal health. The national regulator for compulsory specification and the South African Bureau standard are two of the 4 technical infrastructure institutions critical for the country's industrial development and global competitiveness. As part of the continued oversight over these entities, which date back to the 5th Parliament. The committee engaged on the progress made on the turnaround strategy and financial reporting in relation to issues raised by the AG. In addition, the committee visited the laboratories and testing sites of both SABS and NRSC. The committee assessed the progress made on the implementation of the turnaround strategy, in particular the measures to resolve financial system deficiency by the NRCS. The committee also welcomed the appointment of the ICT consultant to assist the NRCS in the development, management, and implementation of the ITC modernization project, and the sharing of critical skills between government entities. Furthermore, Chairperson, the approach SABS seeks to strategic partnership to develop and maintain its prioritized laboratories. This will assist in addressing the financial constraint facing the institution in securing the revenue. Without extending the progress that has been made, Chairperson, the committee identified areas in which entities need to continue to improve on. The committee need to check, Chairperson, in terms of whether the vacancies that the critical and implementation of the turnaround strategy has been filled, Chairperson. Number two, that the implementation of the ICT modernization project is expedited and ensure that the better functioning of the NRCS and addressing the financial reporting challenges of the entities. Chairperson, the ensuring that the SABS and the continues to implement the turnaround strategy to ensure financial stability and the ability to re-establish itself as a preferred certification and testing service provider, particularly in the areas where it competed commercially. The SABS continue to seek strategic partnership to develop and maintain prioritized laboratories and ensure the lack of capacity within the cement laboratory, which was exacerbated by the delay due to electricity supply disruptions. In this regard, the SABS should consider establishing an independent electrical supply for the laboratory to mitigate against the impact of continuous disruption on the accuracy and the testing results, Chairperson. The ANC support the report of the oversight visit to Gauteng. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections?
Yes, Madam Speaker. Please note the objection of
Yes, Chair.
plus. Thank you.
The objection of the FF plus and the objection of the EFF will be noted.
Thank you.
And the report is accordingly agreed to. Honorable members, before I ask the Secretary to read the fourth order and allow the Deputy Speaker to come in, I just want to make a ruling on what happened on the 30th July 2020 during the declaration on the report of the Portfolio Committee on Communications on the MDDA vacancies. Honorable Swart rose on a point of order and asked whether Honorable Hendricks had threatened Honorable Thring. I undertook to get advice on the matter and revert back to the House with considered ruling. Now, having studied the video footage of the incident, I wish to rule as follows. Honorable Hendricks was responding to the point Honorable Thring made about the media coverage to, and I quote, expose the cowardly and brutal acts of Islamic jihadists by reporting on the burning of churches and kidnapping of young girls, the beheading of people by Islamic jihadists. Honorable Hendricks stated that, I quote, the last speaker has obviously gotten this his facts wrong. Those people in Mozambique are agents of Israel and agents of America. They are not Islamic jihadists. And he must be very careful about making such a statement in the 6th Parliament. I close quotes. While members of the Assembly enjoy the freedom of speech as enshrined in Section 58.1 of the Constitution of 1996, that freedom is subject to Section 16.2 of the Constitution. 1996 as provided for the rules and orders of the House. Rule 84 provides that no member may use offensive, abusive, insulting, disrespectful, or unparliamentary words or language, nor offensive, unbecoming, or threatening gestures. Having reviewed the video footage, I find that Honorable Hendricks held a different view on who was committing the atrocities Honorable Thring had mentioned. Honorable Hendricks' words cannot be construed as a threat to Honorable Thring, but had merely cautioned him against using words loosely that may be deemed offensive by a certain section of our society. As such, I find that Honorable Hendricks' input could not be deemed as a threat to another member of this House, but a point of debate, which requires of us to be wise and not really hurt each other's feelings as we work here. Thank you very much. That is my ruling on the matter.
On a point of order, Honourable House Chair.
Yes, Honourable Thring.
Honourable House Chair, the ACDP as a disciplined party, while we may differ with you, accept your ruling. However, while you are making your ruling, we've had a Member of Parliament from the EFF, Nazir Paulson, who made a statement and said he's just a crybaby, referring either to Honourable Swart or to myself. Now, you can check that and you can listen to the recording. Honourable Paulson has on a number of occasions been warned about flouting the regulations of this House, where he interjects without your permission.
Thank
and
you.
I ask again, Honourable House Chair, that you deal with Honourable Paulson in the strictest manner possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I did not hear that remark. I just heard something in the speakers. We will follow that up, Honourable Thring. Thank you very much.
Thank you, House Chair.
Thank you. Deputy Speaker. Order
yes, Honourable Chairperson.
Order number 4.
Yeah.
Thank you. You may proceed.
The Secretary will read the 4th order.
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Trade and Industry on oversight visit to Western Cape.
It appears to me that it's Honorable Mbuyani who's going to introduce the report. Am I correct? Or is it Duma, the chairperson?
Yes, Deputy Speaker. Yes.
Okay,
Deputy.
Chairperson Duma Nkosi, go ahead in that.
Good afternoon, Deputy Speaker, honorable members, fellow South Africans. The advancement of the democratic development requires, among other things, the development finance institution should play an important role in providing developmental finance support to companies, especially companies owned by the historically disadvantaged groups. This will contribute to the transformation of the economy and broaden economic participation. Consistent to these objectives, the Portfolio Committee on Trade and Industry undertook a Western Cape oversight visit to projects funded by the Industrial Development Corporation, IDC, and the National Empowerment Fund, NEF. The committee visited the Cape Town Film Studio, located just off N2, opposite Kaelicha. The studio is the most successful film studio in the developing world. The studio has received funding from the IDC amounting to 84 million rands in support of its contribution to the local economy, job creation, and attracting foreign investment. The committee also visited another IDC-funded project, the Noodle Factory in Philippi. The Noodle Factory is the first facility in South Africa to produce instant noodles. It received 4.8 million rands funding from the IDC and additional funding through the Black Industrialist Program. The committee also visited a project funded by the NEF, Rise Apparent Uniform Pagamile Industries in Philippi. Rise Apparent Uniform is a clothing manufacturing which is 100% Black, female-owned and managed. It offers functional clothing such as uniform, corporate wear, and protective clothing under the Rise Uniform brand. The committee engaged the beneficiaries regarding the impact of the entity's funding, involvement, and any challenges facing the beneficiaries to operate and compete effectively. The committee welcomed the Industrial Development Corporation and the National Empowerment Fund's investment in these businesses for creation of employment and creating of value chain through these business works, which are small businesses. The committee also applauded the reactiveness of the IDC and NEF in also providing non-financial technical support to these companies. Informed by this deliberation, the committee requests that the House consider this report. Further, recommends that the House request that the Minister of Trade and Industry consider engaging Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture to initiate a program to nurture the development of local content, including indigenous stories, to translate this into film and television production. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. I see there are requests for declarations. And Honorable Cuthbert.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Honourable Deputy Speaker, on the 11th of February 2020, the Portfolio Committee on Trade, Industry and Competition visited 3 projects funded by the Industrial Development Corporation and the National Empowerment Fund to ascertain whether or not development finance institutions were making a meaningful impact and contribution to the South African economy. Our first stop was the Cape Town Film Studios, where we were briefed on the significant growth and development that it has achieved since its inception in 2008. Notably, it has generated an economic impact of 15 billion rand and has created 88,000 full-time equivalent jobs. Moreover, it has secured several international movies and TV series to its studios, which I believe have shone a bright light on the South African film industry. Now, Deputy Speaker, this is how public-private partnerships should operate, with local, provincial and national government working in synergy with the private sector. It is also a testament to the excellent work being done by the City of Cape Town and the provincial government's economic development agency, Westgrowth. It shows that where a sound economic environment is fostered through a focus on growth and opportunity, South African industry can compete with the most developed of international economies. However, several concerns were raised by stakeholders during our visit, such as the lack of incentives for international investors and the Copyright Amendment Bill. We were informed that the DTRC has a cap of 50 million rand on film-based incentives, which impacts on South Africa's competitiveness as a desirable location for producers. In response to this challenge, the industry has called on government to increase this amount to 100 million rand and or the use of alternative incentive mechanisms such as tax rebates, etc. In respect of the Copyright Amendment Bill, which was recently sent back to the Portfolio Committee by President Ramaphosa, the industry was extremely concerned by the initial iteration of this bill. To quote the committee report, "The TV industry is a risky business, as there is a large upfront investment made without certainty that the production will in fact be successful. The industry will therefore tend to invest in locations that mitigate its risks. Consequently, it considers the financial and tax systems as well as the laws protecting copyright, among others. Currently, certain provisions of the Copyright Amendment Bill create some uncertainty for industry players. Therefore, Chairperson, or shall I say Deputy Speaker, it is critical that the Portfolio Committee takes on board these concerns as we begin to revise the Copyright Amendment Bill in the coming weeks. Our second stop for the day was to Rise Uniforms in Philippi, where we met an energetic young businesswoman who, despite significant setbacks, had managed to create a successful textile business. Many of the workers she employed in her business did not have any prior experience in this line of work and found themselves previously unemployed. Despite this, she was able to provide them with on-the-job training and necessitate their re-entry into the jobs market, thus directly contributing to the development of her local community. Our last stop for the day was to the noodle factory, where we met an entrepreneur who, after a school tour to Malaysia, discovered ramen noodles as a cheap meal alternative to existing options that were present in the South African market. He informed us that he was motivated to start his business because of hunger and poverty that he had witnessed in his community. What started out as a means to satisfy an imperative social need has flourished into a very successful business. Not only is this business the first facility in the country to produce instant noodles, but it also employs 447 people and is able to produce approximately 1 million units of noodles per day. Furthermore, it produces its own brands of noodles, as well as several other local and international brands on behalf of large international conglomerates. Both Rise Uniforms and the Noodle Factory are beneficiaries of development finance institutions that chose them on the basis of identity markers. However, Deputy Speaker, it is not this practice that has made them successful, but rather their adherence to the fundamentals of running a business, which they have done, and for that I salute them. We support this particular Oversight Committee report. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. The EFF, Honorable Yako.
Thank you, Chairperson. Sorry, Deputy Speaker. As a portfolio committee, we were extremely excited to see how the film industry on a large scale is able to portray worlds that we see in movies and turn them into reality. The Cape Town Film Studio, which is partly funded by the Industrial Development Corporation, exposed just how much talent we have in this country and how diverse the film and entertainment industry is. It also exposed how white the film industry remains and how unwilling it is to transform. There is a huge potential for the Cape Town Film Studio to do more, not only in transforming its diversity, but also in doing more to equip and give capacity to the people who live in Khayelitsha, just across the road from them, apart from using them as labor. The film industry in South Africa could benefit, Minister, from more studios like this one in Cape Town and diversify its local productions. I will not go into the issue of the copyright amendment bill, because that is something that we will seek to make sure that it goes through, and we would like for it to go through as soon as possible so that our people can benefit from copyrights as well as the hard work they do. The film industry, as a committee, we also witnessed the amazing synergy of the noodle factory situated in Philippines. A well-functioning factory that employs hundreds of people in the surrounding township, also funded by the IDC. Their main issue was the power cuts once again that they are subjected to by Eskom, which stalls production and costs the factory lots and lots of money in repairs and loss of income. It was saddening, however, to witness women who milled outside the factory, whom we were told are there every day, looking for employment. A glaring sign that as a country, our people want jobs and they want them now. Our people want the opportunity to work and make a living for themselves, and that the state needs to do something in creating more job opportunities for its people. What was empowering in our oversight was witnessing a very powerful Black woman who has overcome rejection to own the Rise Apparel factory, which manufactures uniforms for Boxer stores as well as Pick and Pay. It's funded by the National Empowerment Fund. This factory, also situated in Philippines, employs hundreds of people, as well as providing skills in making apparels. However, the owner lamented on how difficult it is for emerging business owners to receive funding from our banks. I believe South African banks need to take emerging entrepreneurs seriously and commit to assisting our country grow. People need jobs, and for the country to grow, job opportunities need to be created. Banks need to commit to making this country grow. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable Yako. Honorable Msimang of the IFP.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. In oversight of funded IDC and NEF projects in Cape Town in February this year, furthermore, in ensuring engaging with the beneficiaries regarding the impact of the entities, funding, involvement, and any other challenges that might adversely be affecting the beneficiaries of this funding in terms of the operations and competition, allow me, Honorable Deputy Speaker, to begin by voicing the support of the IFP for the investment by the IDC into the film industry sector. Although overtaken by the current global pandemic, this industry will return to normality, and Cape Town will remain viable for the production of both local and international film and television. Here, the committee recommendations and concerns that the physical capacity of the studios remains limited, and that this would hinder growth of the industry must be noted, as our film industry should be prepared to take advantage of every opportunity that presents itself in the near future, as this will bolster the sector, create jobs, and positively impact upon overall economic growth. All must therefore be done by government in order to create the necessary environment to entice foreign film production in South Africa, as the attendant inflow of foreign funds will have far-reaching positive impacts and indirect economic benefits. Transfer of skills and development of skills for our local communities is entirely welcomed and applauded. Deputy Speaker, entities such as the IDC and NEF have a vital role to play in getting South Africa working again. They unlock access to finance which might not otherwise have been available and create opportunities where none exist. IFP supports the report.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Akbar Mulder of the EFF Plus.
Dankie, achtbare Junk Speaker. Het is die Vryheidsfront Plus. Achtbare Junk Speaker, die Vryheidsfront Plus verwelkom die oorsigbesoek deur die Portefeulje Komitee vir Handel en Nywerheid en Mededinging aan die Kaapstad Filmatelier, Rice Uniforms en 'n noedelvervaardigingsfabriek. Die prestasie van die filmatelier word internasionaal erken en het die 42 produksies met 'n ekonomiese waarde van 15 miljard rand en 88 voltydse werksgeleenthede is merkwaardig. Die volhoubaarheid hiervan is egter in gedrang omdat daar 'n vaardigheidstekort bestaan in die bedryf. Daar word nie genoeg gedoen om vaardigheid in Suid-Afrika te behou en die oordrag van vaardigheid te verseker, terwyl die onsekerheid oor die status en inhoud van die kopieregwetsontwerp verdere beleggings in die bedryf ontmoedig. Voorsitter, die befondsing van die Rice Uniforms en Philippi en die noedelfabriek deur die Nasionale Bemagtigingsfonds is onvoldoende en die voorstel van die komitee dat die handels- en besigheidsbanke hul kredietvoldoeningsvereistes moet aanpas om bemagtiging te bevorder is irrasioneel. Suid-Afrika sal eendag waarlik vry wees, nie daar onder meer 'n bemagtigingsfonds vir alle gemeenskappe bestaan en nie soos die National Empowerment Fund of die Nasionale Bemagtigingsfonds eksklusief vir swart ekonomiese bemagtiging. Die VF Plus steun daarom nie die verslag. Dankie, achtbare Adjunct Speaker.
Baie dankie, Honourable Tring from the ACDP.
Deputy Speaker, Steve Swart here from the Chamber. I understand he's just been disconnected. Can we hold him over for a speaker or two to see whether he can be reconnected? If not, I will try and deliver.
Okay, it's okay. I will ask Honourable Sheikh Imam, is he connected? Sheikh Imam?
Deputy Speaker, I understand Honourable Thring is now connected. He is now connected. Can we try and call him again?
Okay, it's all right. Let him come in. It does appear like Honourable Sheikh Imam is not connected. Go ahead, Honourable Thring. I see you are back there.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The ACDP welcomes this report of this department on the oversight visit to the Cape Town Film Studios and the noodle factory funded by the Industrial Development Corporation and a project funded by the National Empowerment Fund, namely Rise Apparel Uniforms, all of these in the Western Cape. The ACDP notes the challenges raised by these business entities, mainly around the area of raising capital. For the Cape Town film industry, the challenge is to raise further capital to grow the studio base and a call to raise the film and television incentives from the current 50 million to 100 million in order to secure high budget productions. For Rise Apparel, a 100% black female-owned business, the noodle factory, the challenge was in securing funding from the commercial banks, despite having excellent business plans and proposals in place. The ACDP acknowledges the support given by the IDC and the NEF to these businesses, thus helping to create and sustain some 88,489 jobs. Honourable Deputy Speaker, there is no doubt, however, that our economy is in trouble. GDP is expected to contract by some 10%. 3 to 7 million people are expected to lose their jobs. Our debt to GDP is expected to surpass 80% in the next year or so. This government is penalizing our future generations by incurring debt and then passing it on to the generations to come. Our gross fixed capital formation dipped by some 10% in the fourth quarter of last year, with real capital expenditure by general government declining by 17.6% and the private business enterprise declining by some 10%. Our trade deficit with our BRICS partners in the fourth quarter was 26 billion, This trade deficit is consistent over the last 5 years. The looting of the public purse by corrupt individuals continues unabated with seemingly no consequences. What we need, Honourable Deputy Speaker, is an honest, hard-working, trustworthy, ethical and capable government so that we can grow our employment base with more film studios, more noodle factories and more Rise apparel uniform businesses like we've seen in the Western Cape. The ACDP stands ready to fill that space. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Al-Jama, Honourable Hendrickson.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Well done on the initiative in introducing textile opportunities in the African townships. And Honourable Deputy Speaker, my constituency, we live on noodles, so we really support the support that has been given to the outfit that was funded and that are making noodles. However, when it comes to the film industry, we heard about the lack of diversity. We don't support any funding for the film industry because they capture cultural institutions in the process. I refer to the Good Hope Centre where they destroyed the Malay culture. And as you know, we have a different form of Afrikaans and they're trying to destroy that form of Afrikaans. So we don't actually, there's no time to elaborate, but we don't support any funding for the film industry because they've captured the Good Hope Centre in Cape Town. Honourable Chair, Honourable Deputy Speaker, I take exception to the accusation that the Industrial Development Corporation and the National Empower Fund people are looting. They are not looting, Honourable Chair. We haven't heard any evidence and we shouldn't cast aspersions on structures that are doing their best. Al-Jamal will support the report. Thank you very much, Honourable Chair.
Thank you very much. Is it honorable in the list here? I've got Honorable Mutaung. Is it Honorable Mutaung here or is it Honorable Mbuyane? What is the arrangement? You have not updated my list, yes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It's N.E. Mutaung.
Is it Honorable Mutaung? Go ahead, ma'am.
Honorable members, fellow South Africans, economic transformation should be driven by, amongst other things, the support to domestic industries. This requires, in the main, the provision of the financial support to domestic industries. The NEF and IDC plays a critical role in providing financial support to industry, and in a case, boost local economic growth and thus create employment. The Portfolio Committee on Trade and Industry, in its oversight role, visited 3 different enterprises, which is Cape Town Film Studio, opposite Kaelisha, the Northern Factory, and the Rise Uniform in Philippi. The committee saw the impact of the entity's funding on developing local businesses and job creation. As a point of emphasis, the partnership between DTI and IDC Westro and the City of Cape Town, particularly the IDC investment of 84 million into the Cape Town Film Studio, enabled the studio to host 42 productions with an economic impact of about 15 billion since in its inception, and the creation of 88,000 full-time equivalent jobs during the first 8 years of their operations. It is also enabled the studio to support local businesses from the surrounding areas. The IDC funding on the Northern Factory enabled the company to streamline its production and increase its capacity to fill growing local and international orders. With its capacity, the Northern Factory employed 447 people. While the NEF funding to Rise Uniform, 100% black-owned female, supported the increase in its capacity and the employment of 52 employees, of which 81% were black females. In engaging with these companies, the committee highlighted the following: limited capacity at the Cape Town Film Studios, and its impact on limiting the growth of the industry, as well as the negative impact on its ability to attract additional work and thus its job creation capacity. Challenges raised by the Nodle factory regarding the impact and the cost implication of load shedding due to the loss of production time and input. The needs for a rice uniform factory to address the issues of ventilation and air cooling system for the health of its employees and non-compliance with the occupational health and safety condition. The committee applauded the positive impact of the Film and TV Incentive Program on transformation, the contribution of produce local film and television stories, and the contribution of transfer and developing a variety of skills to local communities, which includes skills such as carpentry, construction, and costume production. The committee welcomed the approach by Rice Uniform and the Nodle Factory to build partnership with other companies to improve the competitiveness and economies of scale. It does growing their businesses and job creation in the process. The committee acknowledged the technical assistance offered by the National Empowerment Fund and the Industrial Development Corporation to assist in developing Rice Uniform and Nodle Factory. Incentives and provision of funding by development finance institutions to businesses is critical for economic transformation and growth. The ANC supports the adoption of this report. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Mutaung. Chief Whip, I skipped you. I don't know how that happened. It's now your turn to tell us what to do.
Deputy Speaker, you always skip me. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I move that this House adopt the report. Thank you.
Okay. Honorable members, the Chief Whip has now just moved that you accept the report, the motion that the report be adopted. Any objection?
Honorable Chairperson, would you please note the objection of the Freedom Front Plus? Thank you.
We will. The Freedom Front Plus. We will note your objection. Any other objection we must note? Okay, let's proceed. It's agreed to. The Secretary will read the fifth order.
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Employment and Labour on oversight visit on Compensation Fund headquarters.
Okay. Thank you. I now call upon the Honorable ML Tunjo. Tetanatisis. Are you connecting, Honorable Tunjo?
Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you.
On the 13th of March, the Portfolio Committee on Employment and Labour conducted an oversight to the offices of Compensation Fund in Pretoria. That was necessitated, it emanated from a Portfolio Committee meeting that sat on the 26th of February. And I think it will be important, Deputy Speaker, for me to say that that decision was taken from that Portfolio Committee after a very heated debate, after the presentation of the tabling of the second quarter by the Compensation Fund, where there were members who were really casting aspersions on the quality and the quantity of the report in terms of what then the Compensation Fund was presenting. And one of the issues which were very challenging were that the compensation fund migrated from uMahluko to a ComEase information system. One of the objectives of this oversight visit was that the fund received disclaimers with findings for a period of 5 years. The Auditor General reports some of the non-compliant areas, which include poor quality of financial statements and material misstatements not corrected, irregular expenditure, fruitless and wasteful, inability to collect debts, lack of consequence management, and inadequate management of contracts. The fund identifies some of the following service delivery challenges: inadequate ICT infrastructure, resulting in a volume of unpaid medical claims, medical service providers who destabilize the fund system for their own advantage, unregulated involvement of third parties in the claims process. The committee welcomed the fact that the fund had developed, with all those challenges, the fund has developed an action plan which was implemented, which was to be implemented in phases, of which phase 1 has already been implemented. In our visit, the department was led by the DG, the fund commissioner was present, board members were present, representatives of the boards were also present. In that, we received a presentation by the compensation fund through its commissioner, and a demonstration was also, we're exposed to a demonstration on how the ComEase system was working. A walkabout was also conducted by some of the members, and the reason for that walkabout was that we be exposed to how claims are being processed. The committee observed the following: the migration from uMahluko to ComEase system has some challenges. Despite those challenges to the ComEase, the system is functional on the internal user side and has resulted in open links being closed. The closure of the links in the IT system has resulted in frustration of the third parties. The separation of the compensation from the department is not necessary at this stage. The challenges for the service level, the challenges of the service level agreement between the compensation fund and the PIC were noted. The compensation fund is grappling with its historical inefficiencies. We therefore recommended to the department, by recommending to the Minister of the Employment and Labour to ensure that full forensic report be provided on all investigation of cases of fraud against the compensation fund. Nationwide inspection investigations be continued, in particular with regard to the fraudulent medical claims, and IT support is provided for the end users of the ComEase system. The internal audit should visit provinces in order to investigate what is happening at the provincial level. The minimum service level agreement concluded with PIC is monitored, and there are consequences for non-compliance. The compensation fund is to table its report, its action plan on quarterly basis. The department to the committee, the Department of Employment and Labour should report back to the portfolio committee on progress made with regard to the above mentioned recommendations within a month after this report has been adopted in the National Assembly. I therefore table this report to the House and thank all members of the portfolio committee who were present during our oversight. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Chief Whip, Nkebe ka o tlodisa mahlo hape mme. Ke monyetla wa hao hore o re jwetse hore re etseng ka tlaleho ena re qetang ho fumana. O reng?
Ha ke lebohe ntate modulasetulo ke tsitsinye hore tlaleho ena re amoele re le ntlu ena ya parlamente ke a leboha.
Okay. There are requests for declarations of vote, and I will now allow each member as we've done before. Honorable Bagray of the DA.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Thank you very much. The Democratic Alliance rejects the report. The Democratic Alliance firstly wishes to point out that this was a sham visit. A visit of this nature has to be exposed and stopped in the future. It is ludicrous to conduct an oversight visit to headquarters where almost 100% of the work is done online. The ridiculousness of the situation was pointed out in the actual report when it stated, while the members were there, they engaged with one client who had administrative challenges. I mean, how ridiculous is that? To conduct an oversight that the administration online by engaging with officials who had prepared for your visit is a complete waste of time, money, and effort. If this were not so serious and so destructive to the injured workers of South Africa, it would be laughable. Samuel Goldwyn once famously said, "Our comedies are not to be laughed at." Unfortunately, this is not a comedy and needs to be taken much more seriously than a sham visit to a virtual online system. Indeed, it makes a lot more sense to conduct a true oversight visit by inviting 24 users of the system who are representing thousands of claimants to the Portfolio Committee at Parliament, which we did. Instead of allowing these users a platform at Parliament and instead of hearing them, this Portfolio Committee took a sad decision to merely conduct an expensive jaunt to Pretoria to speak to the officials and to hear how good they were. Nothing can gainsay the fact that thousands of injured workers have been let down by the compensation fund. The fund has been dysfunctional for over 2 decades. And indeed, I'm trying to help one claimant from Port Elizabeth who lost an eye in an industrial accident 22 years ago and has still not been properly compensated. I personally went to Pretoria, to Port Elizabeth, to accompany this claimant to an internal fund hearing. They promised to help him and pay for his medication. To date, 3 years later, they've paid nothing. It is common knowledge that private medical practitioners in various disciplines will not see compensation fund victims, as the medical practitioners never get paid. The non-payment has overburdened the public sector and has left the injured workers unbelievably in difficult circumstances. When I raised this point at the portfolio meetings, our disbelieving chairperson merely said I should copy her on some of the complaints. I duly did this as dozens were arriving daily. Within days, the chairperson howled and said I must stop flooding her inbox. I have lever arch files full of complaints leaving broken people, injured and unpaid. I am currently dealing and conducting with an oversight with a body called CPC Qualicare, who represent literally hundreds of private doctors who have millions of rands owing. They're not prepared to see patients anymore. I'm constantly writing to the commissioner with no results. This is true oversight, unfortunately. I didn't attend the Pretoria oversight due to personal reasons, but we certainly did send someone to that oversight, the Honourable Hinana, as it was vital to conduct oversight on the ANC and their behaviour at sham oversight meetings. It is at least heartening to see that there's been an acknowledgement that the fund has received disclaimers over the past 5 years. There's been fruitless and wasteful expenditure and an inability to collect debts, lack of consequence management, inadequate management of contracts, etc. I can go on for hours. It is furthermore heartening to acknowledge that there were service delivery challenges and inadequate ICT infrastructure. It is last good to hear an acknowledgement that there's been a refusal by medical practitioners to assist the clients. We all need to remember that a nation is judged by the way it treats its weakest citizens. We in South Africa need to be judged that we ignore and abuse the injured workers of South Africa. Despite many promises from the Compensation Fund and their fancy plans, we've heard nothing. Our committee, unbelievably, still states the system is functional. It was Humpty Dumpty who said, when I use a word, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. Does our Portfolio Committee on Employment and Labour really believe that the injured workers of South Africa who have not been helped are going to believe that the Compensation Fund is functional? But for a few acknowledgements of incompetence, the report should be rejected with the contempt it deserves. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Honourable Member, Honourable Ntangwini.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. While we were not part of the oversight visit to the Compensation Fund headquarters in Pretoria, problems facing the Compensation Fund that was exposed by COVID-19 and what we have always said as the EFF, problems facing the whole of government, state-owned entities and statutory bodies is lack of capacity, continuing corruption and inability to fully lead society. And these oversight visits at times are a waste of resources because of recommendations are ignored and the recommendations don't deal with the real problems. The main challenges facing the Compensation Fund, Speaker, is the reliance on the third parties to carry out its core business, and it is this open up to Compensation Fund fraud, unpaid medical claims and unregulated involvement in unauthorized third parties. The people who suffers this incompetence is workers when they need the Compensation Fund the most because of medical practitioners that refuse to treat them. But you cannot solve problems facing Compensation Fund if you do not fix the public health care system. When workers are injured on duty, they rely on private hospitals because the public health care have collapsed. You also cannot solve problems facing the Compensation Fund if you do not build state and government capacity and stop the misguided and unsustainable reliance on tenders and third parties. Compensation Fund must stop outsourcing its legislative mandate and build internal capacity and must report on measures in place to build this capacity. As we support some of the recommendation of a full forensic report be provided on all investigations and cases of fraud against the Compensation Fund, the nationwide inspections and investigations to be continued with particular regards to fraud, medical claims, and the IT support is provided for the end users of ComEasy system. Internal audits should visit provinces in order to investigate what is happening in provinces. The minimal service agreements concluded with the PIC is monitored and there are to be consequences for non-performance. Therefore, Chair, the Hawks and the police must conclude all investigations and people who are looting must be arrested. We do not support this particular report, Chair, because we still have seen that our people are still struggling with the Compensation Fund. That's why the EFF have started a labor desk to help the workers of South Africa. Our people are still struggling out there, and just to bring a report that doesn't fix the problem of society and the working class out there won't help the people of South Africa. We need to put the work at hand and stop coming with reports that is just sugarcoating, that will anyway just collect dust, as all reports and oversight reports are doing of any committee of this parliament, because all our oversight reports are doing is just a tick box exercise, and that must stop. The corruption that have happened currently on COVID and have been exposed in the Compensation Fund must also be stopped. And we urge the Hawks and police and the minister, he must also provide us a list of investigations that himself is carrying out and cases with case numbers of individuals that cases have been opened. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Denner of the Freedom Front Plus.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. May I continue?
Oh, no. It's Honourable Ngwe, sorry, of the IFP. Sorry, before you.
Honourable members, on consideration of the Portfolio Committee on Employment and Labour's report on its oversight visit to the Compensation Fund headquarters, the IFP from the outset wishes to state its support for the committee's recommendations. In specific, Inkatha strongly supports the recommendation that full forensic report should be provided on all investigations and cases of frauds against the fund, and that nationwide inspections and investigations into fraudulent claims should continue. It is critical that the compensation fund should be efficient, effective, and devoid of loopholes that could provide opportunities for fraudulent claims against the fund. Considering the dire state of our economy, we can ill afford corruption and fraud, and the IFP wishes to emphasize the urgent need to bring those who have abused this fund to book. The IFP will closely monitor the Department of Labour and Employment's progress report following the Portfolio Committee's recommendations. Now, more than ever, we cannot overemphasize the importance of efficient oversight of the executive in the fulfilling their constitutional duty to South African public. Honourable members, the IFP will also closely monitor the performance of the fund, in particular its compliance with the action plan compiled following the Auditor General's findings in the last few years, which revealed financial mismanagement and exorbitant, fruitless and wasteful expenditure. In conclusion, in these challenging times, there rests a duty of all of us as members of Parliament to ensure accountability is enforced and that efficiency and good governance are upheld by government. We cannot allow any more resources to go waste. The cost is too dire. We support the report, Honourable Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Ngwezi. Honourable Denner, this is a chance now.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. The new Comp-Easy system that has been implemented by the Compensation Fund will close the taps for certain claimants who have in the past often defrauded the Compensation Fund by being able to claim double invoices, submitting fraudulent claims, and taking advantage of an overall lack of necessary controls, which was allowed for by the previous Umahluku system. The Comp-Easy system is a good system, a sensible system with the necessary controls to prevent fraudulent claims and will enable the Compensation Fund to process and pay claims efficiently and effectively from start to finish. However, this wonderful system, which cost the Compensation Fund around 300 million rand, does not work. I have stated this in Portfolio Committee meetings numerous times. My colleagues, who also attended the site visit, will attempt to refute this statement by saying that we received a demonstration from the staff of the Compensation Fund where Honourable Denner was present and saw that the system does work. And yes, I did indeed see the demonstration, and they would be correct with regards to this specific demonstration, because the internal processing does work, but the external system, that side of Comp-Easy, which is used by medical practitioners, third parties and other claimants, does not work and was not demonstrated to the Portfolio Committee during this site visit. We have received numerous complaints from medical practitioners who are owed millions of rands by the Compensation Fund due to the fact that they cannot submit invoices and claims because they cannot get into the system. Their tiles don't work, they are blocked for no reason, they cannot track claims, and submitting claims in person at the Compensation Fund offices is a futile exercise. The Commissioner will also attempt to refute this statement, as he has done before, by quoting statistics about the number of claims received on Comp-Easy and the number of claims subsequently processed and paid. But the number of claims that cannot be submitted in the first place due to the faulty system is not taken into account, and thus this output cannot be measured accurately. My ANC colleagues' answer to this would be that those are the fraudulent claims being blocked by the new system, not taking into account that for many of these claims, not even an invoice can be submitted. Thus, the vetting process cannot even be started to separate the fraudulent from the legitimate claims. I've been accused in the committee of looking after the interests of medical practitioners and third-party claimants only, who, according to my colleagues, are my so-called constituency. And I quote, "The FF Plus do not care for the workers. They only want their constituents to benefit." Now, let me make this abundantly clear. If a doctor is owed millions of rands by the compensation fund, to the point where he has to start retrenching his staff and even close his practice, the worker will suffer. The worker will not get treatment. The worker will not be able to benefit from the compensation fund. And the Freedom Front Plus, unlike the ANC, considers both to be equally important. Therefore, we cannot support this report. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Sheikh Imam. Are you able to connect, Honourable Member? Okay, let's go to Honourable Jaisa. Are you able to connect, Honourable Jaisa? Al-Jama, go ahead. Honourable Hendrickson.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. Honourable Chair, Al-Jama would like to congratulate the Portfolio Committee for two reasons. Number one, that they were brave enough to undertake the oversight visit during the pandemic and put themselves at risk, and the nation appreciates that. Secondly, Honourable Deputy Speaker, the IFP have put it very well. The recommendations of the Portfolio Committee is indeed something that we must be proud of, and we look forward to the implementation of the recommendations. Deputy Speaker, I worked in the corporate world for 30 years and as a trade unionist for 10 years. And I'm talking about working for a top JSE limited company and in the union for people with disabilities. My experience has been that one of the departments of the Department of Labour that's doing well is that department. Over 90% of our claims has always been paid, and the research and evidence I heard from the many HR organizations that my company asked me to be a member of. So very, very proud of the compensation fund. The problem, Honourable Deputy Speaker, is that when they allowed the practitioners and the doctors to use consultants to submit claims, they look for every loophole to inflate their claims. With the result that there was hacking, with the result that the Department of Labour had to put in checks and balances, and this messed up the whole system, and that's why there are problems. Yes, there are problems. We heard from the EFF. Internally they're doing very well. Externally, they can't do well because they are outsmarted by the doctors and the medical practitioners. So, Honourable Deputy Speaker, there are many honest doctors, hospitals that will welcome people who are injured on duty. And so it's a whole smokescreen that there is chaos, because just ask for the research. How many claims, what percentage of claims are paid without any problems? It's when these practitioners try and inflate their claims and rob the fiscus that we have a problem. Al-Jama supports this report, Honourable Speaker, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Let's go to Honourable Nonsele of the African National Congress.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, honorable members and fellow South Africans, allow me first to convey our sincere condolences, message of condolences to all the victims of GBVF and the COVID-19. Honorable Deputy Speaker, we celebrating the 65th anniversary of the Freedom Charter this year. As we do that, we in fact take note that we are enjoined by the clause in the Freedom Charter in this debate that reads, "There shall be jobs and security for all." It follows, therefore, that the ANC-led government's commitment to employment creation is fundamentally underpinned by our commitment to a guaranteed health and safety environment at the workplace. As a member of the International Labour Organization, South Africa is committed to the letter and spirit of the Seoul Declaration that was adopted in 2008, which recognizes that health and safety at work is a fundamental human right. The declaration also calls for the building and maintaining of a preventive health and safety culture, which requires the contribution by all members of society. Whilst our nation is honoring the tremendous contribution of women to the liberation of our country from colonial and apartheid past, we must take a moment to reflect on the sad reality that the burden of infections in the workplace is borne largely overwhelmingly by women. We also need to take into account that the ability of the compensation fund to respond to these workplace challenges is in fact, by extension, a response to the immediate challenges faced largely by our women folk who are in fact at the receiving end of the challenges, in particular those occasioned by the COVID-19. The compensation fund is a Schedule 3A public entity of the Department of Employment and Labour. The mandate of the compensation fund is derived from Section 27(1)(c) of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. It is therefore important to ensure that workers have access to social security as envisaged in the Constitution. When workers get ill or are injured at work, the compensation fund must be adequately resourced and ethically managed so that it is able to compensate those workers appropriately. With a total assets of 71 billion rand and total liabilities of 44.3 billion in 2018 and 2019, the compensation fund has been used by some unscrupulous people for years as a cash cow. By introducing the CompEasy system, the department is seeking to protect the fund from abuse as part of its efforts to heed President Cyril Ramaphosa's call for more effective governance and strengthened controls to remove opportunities for fraud and corruption. Minister Nglesi has declared that the committee that the days the fund paid out unsupported claims willy-nilly are over. He has also assured us that the new system will work for workers rather than the service providers, which is a point that is being argued by the opposition. I think we need as well to talk to the dubious role that is being played by the opposition party here. It appears that some from the opposition benches are not happy that the fund is now focused on servicing injured workers rather than the middlemen. The ANC welcomes the fact that under the new system, the entities that submit the claim is now responsible for gathering the supporting document. The team members will have been conspicuous by their silence about the disclaimers by the AD whilst they argue for the changes and against the changes and for the retention of the obviously ineffective and manipulated Metro IT system. Whilst the DA is in the forefront of attacks against non-payment of claims, they simultaneously find reason not to be part of finding solutions. Their failure to join the oversight visit must be treated with contempt it deserves. Honorable Deputy Speaker, we want to place on record that Honorable Bagram, in particular, made an apology at the convenient time, citing that he's going on an overseas trip. He never went on that overseas trip. In fact, he was seated in Cape Town and made a presence in one session that was held in Parliament during the time of the oversight visit. The kind of conduct that he has displayed so far indicates that, as he has said himself even here, that it indicates something quite sinister, because all he reports about is his efforts at every minute and every time about payments, not paying any particular attention to the problems associated with fraudulent claims that have been made over a very, very long time. And that quite surprises us. Same can be raised with his colleague, Honorable Kato, who has dismissed the issues of fraud and corruption raised by the minister as an alleged smokescreen. But we are aware that some of the fund's former staff members have also resigned since they realized that the allegations of corruption were being dealt with. Some have since joined the service providers because they know the system, and they were coming back now as service providers, and in order to continue to fleece the system. We note, Honorable Deputy Speaker, that as ANC, taking into account that these are differences and some petty misconduct or fallout that is in fact displayed by the opposition parties. And as ANC, we take note from the important and very much eloquent articulation of this kind of contradiction that the late General Secretary of the South African Communist Party, Comrade Moses Mabhida, referred to in defining it as follows, I quote, "Every square inch of ground, even the soil underneath your own 2 feet, is terrain of class contestation," close quote. Honorable Deputy Speaker, we know that some members in this House represent exclusively the interest of their wealthy donors, while they are happy to accept the vote of the working class and the poor in general. As the ANC, we acknowledge that the new IT system is not yet operating optimally. But to overcome these challenges, all stakeholders have to play their roles. The recommendations of the committee to the minister based on the oversight visit have laid the platform for improvement. So, therefore, we call for the support for all the recommendations of the committee. Honorable members, in concluding, the world of work is changing rapidly, not only due to COVID-19, but the pandemic has certainly made the workplace more hazardous. The ANC calls on the department to continue strengthening the inspection and enforcement of workplaces to ensure compliance. As President Cyril Ramaphosa has said, in his capacity as the co-chairperson of the International Labour Organization Commission on the Future of Work, I quote, "Now as never before, we are being called upon to protect working people against the rising tide of unemployment through universal social protection. We have to invest in people's capabilities, in skills development, in lifelong learning, in workplace inclusivity, and in advancing gender equality," close quote. House Chairperson, as ANC, we move for the support of this report and for endorsement of it. But we also want to note as well that the contradictory message that has been put forward by the member of the Freedom Front Plus is quite strange, because she accepts that the system is in fact perfectly working, and she fails to convince her own colleagues in the Democratic Alliance so that they need to understand that in order for us to root out corruption, we need all hands on deck. We don't need petty squabbles that are demonstrated, in particular by Honorable Bakre, who has throughout the conduct when we have dealt with this matter, used each and every opportunity as more like I'm sorry, I almost said like a spoiled brat. My apology, Honorable Deputy Speaker. But I meant that honestly, the conduct of Honorable Bakre has been very much childish and very much unhelpful in trying to resolve the problems afflicting the compensation fund. We can even ask
Honorable
a simple question
Nontsele.
as to why
Honorable
over a long
Nontsele.
period of 5 years.
Honorable Nontsele, your time has long expired. I'm sorry for that. Honorable
sorry.
Deputy Speaker.
I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for assisting him. But let's thank him for his self-correction. That machine means it works, so that when he breaks the rules, he corrects himself quickly before we chop his head off. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Now, here's a moment the Chief Whip asked us to, that the motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections? No objections? Agreed to.
Deputy Speaker, no. The system have delayed. Deputy Speaker.
Oh, okay. Honorable Kangwini, that's the objection of the EFF?
Yeah, can you note the objection? They must sort out the IT system before we can support.
It's okay. All right. You are still able to talk.
In the House.
Any other objection we must note?
In the House.
Honourable Speaker, please note the objection of the Freedom Front Plus. Thank you.
Of the Freedom Front Plus, yes.
And the ACDP,
Anywhere else?
thank you. The ACDP, thank you, Chair.
Also the
Okay.
DA, please. The objection of the DA, please, Chair.
Okay, the DA, yes. Okay, those objections will be noted. The report is agreed to. The Secretary will read the last order of the day. Honorable Chairperson, Honorable House Chairperson.
Yes, Deputy Speaker.
I request that you please help me with the last one. I've got problems here that are going to cut me off any minute now, and I can't do what I did yesterday, transition from one gadget to another. So it will be difficult for me. I'd like to plead with you to take over the last bit.
Kakati hauna. I will ask.
Thank you very much.
I will ask the Secretariat to read the last order.
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Basic Education on oversight visit to Capricorn and Sekhukhune Education Districts, Limpopo Province.
Thank you. May I call on the Honorable Mpingo Mikikaba from the virtual platform to introduce the report.
Thank you, House Chair and honorable members. In line with our mandate to perform oversight and accountability, the Portfolio Committee on Basic Education conducted a visit to the Capricorn and Sekhukhune Education Districts in Limpopo Province from the 3rd to the 5th February 2020. The primary purpose of the oversight visit was to monitor and oversee the overall state of schooling in the province. This ensured that learners and educators are in school, in class on time, learning and teaching 7 hours a day as pronounced by the President in previous State of the Nation addresses. As a strategy of monitoring and support over the work of the executive, the Portfolio Committee further aimed to monitor the timeous delivery of all learner-teacher support material to schools, the provisioning of educators, and the progress made in the admission and registration of learners. The Portfolio Committee sought to have an understanding of any further challenges being faced with regards to the contingency plan in place and possible assistance that could be forthcoming. I am pleased to report that in fulfilling Parliament's oversight role, the Portfolio Committee visited several schools in Limpopo. The visit school was identified from an inclusive approach, that is special schools, technical schools, primary schools, skills-focused schools, performing and underperforming high schools. In emphasizing our oversight function, as members, we noted challenges in Limpopo and would like to quote that in 1994, we were also warned by Nelson Mandela, and I quote that he said, "Democracy itself cannot survive unless the material needs of the people, the bread and butter issues are addressed as part of the process of change and as a matter of urgency. It should never be that the anger of the poor should be the finger of accusation pointed at all of us because we failed to respond to the cries of the people for food, for shelter, for the dignity of the individual. And I'll close quote. I believe that there is value in regarding our colleagues in provinces as strategic partners. It strengthens strategic partnership when we engage openly and share to learn about success and challenges. However, one has to state categorically clear that amongst other challenges experienced on our first day of arrival was the unavailability of the MEC of Education, whose apology was submitted via the acting HOD. To that end, the senior officials briefed the Portfolio Committee and presented the state of schooling in the Limpopo province. We approached the oversight visit from a perspective of Parliament oversight and accountability model that ensures, as members of Parliament, we deliver on a constitutional mandate. From members' observation, the utilization of the ASIDI grant to assist the schools with dilapidated infrastructure, with building refurbishment, with new buildings, sanitations, water, etc., is one of the major problems in the Limpopo province. If one would cite the example of shortages of infrastructure, it includes shortage of classrooms, shortage of mobile classes, the lack of laboratories, inadequate school furniture, hostels, and hostel furniture that needs upgrading, toilets, and water reticulation. Honorable members, the Portfolio Committee is adamant that the department urgently need to visit schools such as Bachabang Primary School to focus its attention on assisting the school with all the challenges faced and other schools as identified in the report. Another observation of the challenges is that finding qualified and experienced mathematics and technical mathematics educators to teach our learners is difficult. This is an area that the Department of Basic Education needs to pay attention to, especially for schools in deep rural areas. On a closing note, more needs to be done in technical maths at technical schools. Infrastructure improvement is critical and improve. However, the Portfolio Committee will make follow-ups through oversight visits in order to track progress in all provinces, including improvements towards National Senior Certificate pass rate. The Department of Basic Education and the province must assist with challenges faced by the schools. I therefore move, Honorable Chair, that the House accept the report. Thank you very much.
Sithokoze mhlonishwa, sosibepi wenhlangano ekulu, senzani ngalombiko.
Inkomo mhlabiseki wasitulu. Niyima nikombela kuri yamukela report lena. Yishona.
Like hands. There's a request for declarations from the DA. The Honorable van der Walt will take the platform.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Mr. Nelson Mandela said, and I quote, that no country can really develop unless its citizens are educated, close quote. Thabo Mbeki said, and I quote, there is a problem with education in South Africa. That much is patently clear. The problem is that the leaders don't know how to tackle the problem or where even to start tackling the problem, close quote. Mr. Zuma said, well, actually, he didn't say anything except from making empty promises to deliver to our children and schools. To President Ramaphosa and the ANC premiers, if you are serious to build an education system where the injustices of the past no longer determine a child's school education, you must appoint fit-for-purpose MECs of education, especially in struggling provinces like Limpopo, where we had for years the worst MECs and underperformance just was no shame to them. Then all hope rises with the appointment of a new MEC in 2019. But disappointment was quick to knock on the door when the MEC and HOD chose to attend an ANC party lehotlo on a Monday instead of attending the Portfolio Committee's oversight to their province. Then the chairperson denies our stakeholders who made an effort and travelled long distances to come and raise their matters with the committee an opportunity to address the committee, only because the MEC must be present, which he was not. Due to the disrespect shown to the committee and our stakeholders, the DEA members withdrew from this oversight and embarked on our own oversight visits ever since, like we always do. Limpopo has about 3,800 public schools, 1.7 million learners, and about 51,000 educators. We are proud of every learner, teacher, and school who receives annual awards and will do so in future, despite the challenges in this and other reports before it. Our matric results remain very disappointing, and our special needs learners and schools are not treated well and should be prioritized. The report we discussed today just confirms what we already know and have experienced during several announced oversight visits by the Portfolio Committee and our own unannounced visits. Report after report highlight the same dire situation, and years of same recommendations had brought very little positive change, if any. The latest NIMS report, end of 2019, still indicate 472 schools still use pit latrines only. And remember, this is a province where our children die in pit latrines after drowning. 83.8% has no computer center, 94% has no laboratories, and 83.1% of our schools has no libraries. As a result of this years of neglect, despite so many provinces and oversight recommendations, 453 of Limpopo schools were listed for COVID-19 emergency sanitation needs. Our business should be our children's education, Chair. Instead, Limpopo choose their business as contractors. Here is some proof over years. School nutrition for poor children is a good example in the past. We saw 7.7 million rand to a student studying in the Free State. Her mother at the time was a special projects manager who oversees the school nutrition program. And as if it's not enough, the mother's brother also scored a 5.6 million rand contract to provide food to learners in the very same town as her daughter, Mokopane. We also saw 700 million rand a year feeding scheme allegedly run as a Jobs for Pals racket with connected companies. Some of the names appeared on lists include current members of parliament and members of the provincial legislature in Limpopo. The nutrition scheme is not meant to make your French rich. It is to feed our poor children. And I quote, "A child who is hungry cannot learn, not in Afrikaans, not in English, not in Sepedi, and not in Sivenda." Close quote. To all our learners in Limpopo and our dedicated principals, teachers, SGBs, who despite the lack of political will by the department, get up every morning, go to their classrooms and schools, striving for success and a better future.
Thank you very much.
Due to respect shown by the MEC and HOD towards Parliament's oversight visit, and the committee chairperson for denying to call the MEC and HOD to the committee to respond to the visit's findings, the DA rejects this report, chairperson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
EFF Mchabiseki Mashavela.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Chairperson, we went to the oversight visit to Capricorn and Sekhukhune in Limpopo earlier this year to see for ourselves the state of readiness for the 2020 school year. Never did we imagine then that our schooling system would be thrown into uncertainty and be overwhelmed as it has been by the impacts of the coronavirus. We already identified then huge problems in relation to the readiness of the school system to create a conducive environment for teaching and learning. We identified overcrowding as a major issue that prevents learning in schools. Many learners in township and rural schools are packed in classrooms like sardines, making it impossible for teachers to pay attention to the learning needs of the learners. Many of these schools did not have water and sanitation, learner support materials, such as textbooks and other enablers, such as laboratories for science subjects. We also identified lack of sufficient school security to guard and protect learners and the schools from vandals. Chairperson, had all these concerns been taken care of by the department, we would not have had a situation where many schools were torched and destroyed by ANC entrepreneurs during the lockdown, who hope to be given tender to refurbish the same schools. Had the department paid attention to what the EFF has always advocated for, that all schools across the country must have the same minimum requirements to allow for the same quality of education, we would not be where we are now as a result of COVID-19. COVID-19 has exposed the department as essentially anti the education of Black children. It is Black children who are left behind today because schools that cater for predominantly white children have the necessary infrastructure to ensure that learning continues even during COVID-19. It is Black children who go to schools without water, without electricity, without sanitation, without sufficiently trained teachers, without security. It is these children who will suffer the most from the COVID pandemic, and they will suffer because the government of the ANC does not give a dime about the education of Black people in this country. We reject this report because it comes way too late and offers no solutions to the problems faced by our schools in Limpopo and across the country. Thank you, House Chairperson.
Thank you. Honorable Ngobo, IFP.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Honorable members, it is a tragic reality that the deep scars of inequality in our country are most prominent in our schooling system. The province of Limpopo deeply reflects this reality. The Portfolio Committee's oversight visit report on Sekhukhune and Capricorn education districts in Limpopo tells the heartbreaking tale of this reality. It is with sadness and frustration that one reads of the shortage of basic furniture, such as desks, chairs, and the shortage of textbooks at certain schools visited by the committee. Honorable members, how can we even start to talk about fourth industrial revolution when schools such as Sepeumleke Secondary School, located in Kamapama suburb, has no laboratory, it has no library, it has no ICT computer laboratory? Can we honestly prepare the youth of today to compete in the global labor market when the government fails to provide even the most basic essentials to make education possible? The Constitution guarantees an unconditional right to basic education. However, this right means very little without proper school infrastructure, sanitation, running water, and electricity. Honorable members, before commenting on the Portfolio Committee's recommendations following the oversight visit, the IFP wishes to express our concern about the Limpopo Premier's announcement of 19 August. The Premier announced that the Special Investigation Unit has been specifically asked to investigate COVID-19 related procurement in various departments, including Department of Education. In these unprecedented times where resources have been stretched to the limit and access to education has been seriously hampered, by this pandemic. These allegations are disturbing. We cannot ignore the severity of this situation. The SIU investigation will be monitored by the IFP, and the IFP will not be a passive role player in the fight against corruption. We demand accountability in bringing to book those who have abused procurement procedures in these unprecedented times. Honourable members, on consideration the recommendations of the portfolio IFP in generations, we however emphasize that the oversight visit was done in February 2020, just before the national lockdown. Undeniably, the recommendations.
Honourable Ngobo, your time has expired.
Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you.
I'm fine.
F plus, Honourable Boshoff.
Dankie, agbare huisvoorsitter. Die portefeulje komitee vir basiese onderwys het aan die begin van die jaar van die moeilikste distrikte om skoling aan te bied in Popo besoek, soos in hierdie verslag uiteengesit. Dit is die dele van die land waar besettings en koloniale verowering die langste weerstaan kon word. The report is disheartening. Schools with too little room, even before social distancing was a buzzword. Dilapidated buildings and underqualified teachers seem to be more the norm than the exception. What is even more disheartening is the apparent disjuncture between education authorities and communities. Communities with a true feeling of ownership of their schools do not vandalize it. They would rather contribute to its upkeep. The Limpopo Education Department does not seem to assist. Small schools are forced to either close or merge with other schools. It is mentioned to the discredit of communities that they resist these measures and want to keep their children in schools in their living area. Countrywide, the policy regarding small schools is to rather supply transport and merge with other schools than schools in the immediate vicinity. While the South African government finds advice from Cuba in areas where they are not really successful, it fails to allow the Cuban example where they excel. In international comparisons, Cuban educational results compare favorable with OECD countries. A point of departure of Cuban education is that each school is regarded as an organ of the community. In remote areas, schools with less than 20 children are maintained. Specific training for conducting multi-grade classes is part of teacher training. Performance of learners of these schools is closely monitored and found not to be inferior to those in bigger schools. Another difference is that during the Cuban Revolution, schools were not negatively affected. The huge appetite for reading and learning from the late leader Fidel Castro is reported as a positive influence on education. Teachers are highly appreciated in society, and local schools are regarded as a collective driving force for educational progress and innovation. That is hugely different from what we see in South Africa. While the findings of this report are supported, it is stressed that we might be looking at the wrong place for solutions. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you.
House Chair.
Thank you. ACGP, agbare lidsukkers. Honourable Soekers.
Chair, there might be a connection problem. Could we ask you just to hold it over until the next speaker? Thank you.
No problem. Honourable Sheikh Imam. Not back. Honourable Nchaisa. Al-Jama, Honourable Hendricks.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. Honourable Chair, I think that the Portfolio Committee is giving us leadership on how to address the problems in basic education, especially in the Limpopo province. I think over the years we've underestimated the harm that apartheid has caused to the education of African children, and especially with regard to the facilities. We heard about the problem of the toilets, that our learners even die in toilets. And so The problem started, Honourable Chair, when the World Bank gave us a loan in 1994, and the condition was to increase the learner-educator ratio from maybe 20 to 50. And that has harmed education. So it's very difficult for any new government to recover from the Bantu education and to bring about transformation in education if the World Bank and the IMF forces the country to increase its learner-pupil ratio. So we feel that going forward for Limpopo, the learner-teacher ratio should be reduced to 20 to 1, and that minimum standards should be established, and the government will at least fund the minimum standards so that we can have quality education and be ready for the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you very much, Honourable Chair.
Thank you. Honourable Sugars.
Thank you very much, Chair. I trust that I'm audible now, Chair.
You are clear.
Honourable Chair, the purpose of this visit is stated in the report for the committee to monitor, support and learn from good practices and assess the functionality of the schooling system. There are very little good practices that we can learn from, other than the enthusiasm of learners and the commitment of hardworking principals and teachers. The state of the schools we visited in the Limpopo province speaks of a poor and disengaged leadership. The words of a young teacher sums up the frustration of a lot of people in our country. He said, and I quote, "We keep on voting every election for the same thing and nothing changes," close quote. It was an emotive outburst at a school where a section of classrooms has been closed because it was unsafe for learners. The teacher or personnel room was in a state of decay. This sums up the state of most of the schools we visited: poor infrastructure, overcrowding of classes.
Continue, we can hear you.
Overcrowding of classes that makes quality education impossible, and poor management of norms and standards. What was clear is that school principals feel incentivized to increase learner numbers and pushing maths and science as subjects, even at the expense of quality learning. It is impossible, Chair, to ensure effective and quality learning with classes of 70 to 83 learners. There is a serious need for us to attract skilled talent in maths and science to close the gap and meet the demand, but this will not be realized in a lackluster environment. It is the ACDP's assessment that the state of education in this province is not because of budget limitations or limited resources. It is the passive officialdom that manages from offices with no passion for the mandate and a leadership who let it happen, rather than demonstrating strong, accountable leadership. Nothing else can explain how the province did not make use of the ACIDI program to address the serious infrastructure issues facing some of the schools. We also note the failure of the MEC to show up at any of the meetings that were scheduled with her. It is a blatant disregard for Parliament that cannot go by unnoticed. How do we get our businesses to invest more and buy into initiatives that will advance learning when there is a clear lack of accountable leadership, Chair? I thank you.
Thank you. ANC, Mchabseg, Tatana Swell. Mchabseg Iswela. Tatana Swell. Honorable Swela. You see on the platform table stuff? Who will, anyone from the The Portfolio Committee? Honorable Suela, maybe you are struggling with connectivity. We can even go back to the one who introduced the report. It's fine. Honorable Mpingo, can you close it, the report? Oh, nangu tatana swell. Honorable Suela.
Do you hear me now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Now I can, yes. Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Chairperson, and greetings to honorable members. The Portfolio Committee Oversight visit to Limpopo in Sekhukhune and Capricorn District is to ensure that the conditions of schools in the area improve to create an enabling environment for teaching and successful learner outcomes. Our schools are also not insulated from the impact of corruption and shoddy delivery from service providers of infrastructure and the National School Nutrition Program. This inefficiency creates infrastructure backlogs that affect the quality of learning as some schools experience overcrowding. The recruitment of youth who are Funza Lushaka bursary holders should prepare for the field of the changing world. This will secure the future of a quality education system in South Africa, particularly in maths and science, which is important for growing our economy. We are encouraged by the efforts of the department in mitigating challenges in schools. The department and its officials, school management team, school staff, and all sector stakeholders play an important role in creating a social agency and implementation of its mandate. Despite the challenges in the sector, the Limpopo Department of Education has put in place systems to improve conditions in our schools to enable teaching and learning. The safety of our learners is important in creating an enabling environment for students to succeed. With high levels of violence in our society, our schools require an effective system to protect them from bullying and abuse in our schools. The safety of the girl child under conditions of rapid gender-based violence and femicide should be assured for all learners. Infrastructure challenges in basic education and our rural communities in general will require ample financial resources which are not within the disposal of government. We call upon our communities to protect schools as sites of human development that create significant social and economic benefits for the community. School vandalism and theft of ICT devices in our society should not be tolerated by all citizens of South Africa. The impact of infrastructure damage delays the program of ensuring our schools have the necessary basic services. The department is forced to rebuild vandalized properties instead of building a new infrastructure. We must also commend schools that were successfully creating partnerships and contributing to protect. In order to fast-track the development in our schools, the department should harness relations with various stakeholders. As the ANC, we support this report of the Portfolio Committee in line with the commitment of the ANC in ensuring robust evidence-based interventions in supporting department to deliver their mandates. We should strengthen our oversight of the Limpopo Department of Basic Education through monitoring progress of implementing of the recommendations in the report before us. Thank you, Chair.
Raleboha. The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections?
Please note the objection of the EFF.
The objection of the EFF will be noted. Yes, Honorable Faber.
Thank you, Chair. Also note the objection of the Democratic Alliance.
Noted. The Democratic Alliance. Any other party? None. The motion is, the report is agreed to. Kengithi uzimu aganichudubaze inaha gailale. That concludes the business of the day and the House is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Malbong Western. Hello.
Ngela.